Good morning. I'm Kenyon McDuffie, at-large council member and chair of the council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today's Wednesday, December 18th, 2024, and we're convening this hearing in person and in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building, as well as via Zoom. The time is 10:40 a.m., and I'm calling this public hearing to order. Today, the committee will receive testimony on 5 measures. Bill 25-838, the Langston Slater Surplus Declaration and Disposition Approval Act of 2024. Bill 25-747, the Living Donor Protection Amendment Act of 2024. Bill 25-810, the Motor Vehicle Insurance Modernization Amendment Act of 2024. Bill 25-476, the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Act of 2023, and Bill 25-1034, the Revised Game of Skill Machines Consumer Protections Amendment Act of 2024. Just as a reminder to public witnesses, each will have 3 minutes to provide testimony and should remember to mute their microphones when they're not speaking if they're testifying via Zoom. Bill 25-838, the Langston Slater Surplus Declaration and Disposition Approval Act of 2024, was introduced by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor on June 5th, 2024. The bill was sequentially referred to the Committee on Facilities and Family Services and the Committee on Business and Economic Development. As introduced, Bill 25-838 would declare district-owned real property known as Langston Slater, located at 33 through 45 P Street Northwest, as no longer required for public purposes, and approve its disposition to allow for the construction of mixed-income residential units. I don't think we got any colleagues online, right? Okay. All right, we're going to turn right to our public witnesses. I don't think any of the members of the committee or any other colleagues have joined us on this hearing at this point. Again, I'm going to ask that participants please mute their microphones when they are not speaking. We have 3 public witnesses who signed up to testify for this measure. If we could have, we got Joyce Robinson Paul, ANC Commissioner. We also have Anna Rodriguez and Simone Goring-Devaney with CSG Urban Partners, LLC. We're going to hear first from Joyce Robinson Paul. Okay. Is Anna Rodriguez in person or online? No? All right. I do see. Simone, you come on up. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us in person. You can begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Chairman McDuffie, members of the committee and staff, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of the proposed disposition of the district-owned Langston Slater property located at 33 through 45 P Street. My name is Simone Goring-Devaney, and I'm managing principal with CSG Urban Partners, the master developer for the project. With me today, I have Suzanne Slater, President and CEO of Habitat for Humanity, Lee Goldstein with Volunteers of America National Services, and Vaughn Perry with the Douglas Community Land Trust. Our redevelopment team is uniquely structured to bring together the collective experience of our teams and each entity. Each of these partners contributes distinct and complementary strengths, ensuring that the final development is not only financially viable, but also responsive to the community's needs. Under CSG's leadership, we have assembled a team equipped to deliver housing, community services, and sustainable development tailored to the aspirations of district residents. The proposed disposition before you today is integral to realizing a bold vision for the Langston Slater site, one that embodies the district's goals for affordable housing, historic preservation, cultural recognition, and inclusion and equitable economic growth. We are deeply appreciative for the district for granting us the opportunity to establish an adaptive reuse model that maximizes the site potential by having a mixed tenure housing model. that will include both rental and for sale affordable housing units. We also are proud of our partnership with the Douglas Community Land Trust and their commitment to long-term affordability that realizes, and just important, is centering community in the decision-making process and providing ongoing stewardship. Central to this project is our unwavering commitment to affordability. 60% of the 52 residential units will be designated as affordable, meeting or surpassing the district's housing goals. The Langston Slater site carries deep historical and cultural significance. We understand that success of the project hinges on our ability to honor the legacy of the past while forging a more equitable and prosperous future. To that end, we have included in our team Ronnie McGee and Associates and EHT Traceries, both of whom are skilled at integrating historical elements into contemporary projects. Most importantly, our project will also align with the district's ambitious climate and sustainability goals and will incorporate environmentally responsible design, construction and practices, and conform to the Enterprise Green Community standards. In conclusion, the Langston Slater project represents an extraordinary opportunity to advance the district's vision for affordable housing.
And thank you for your testimony. I'm going to turn now to Joyce Robinson Paul. Good morning to you. Glad you were able to join us in person. If you can hit the button at the base of your mic, you'll see a red light come on. You can begin your testimony.
Okay, good morning. My name is Joyce Robinson Paul. I'm the ANC Commissioner for the Slater Langston building at 33 P Street Northwest. My testimony will be to ensure that number one, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition study proclaimed that Washington, D.C. is the first most gentrified city in America. Wow, what a reputation. I've looked over the information from the LVLCS team, and it looks like we will be doing only 12 homeownership situations. I think that we really should make sure that this is the last phase in our Truxton Circle area, a historic building that has been there for hundreds of years. I would like to see, number one, more homeownership opportunities for the District of Columbia. We have all type of programs for homeownership. We have people that are lined up waiting for that opportunity to go into a homeownership opportunity. Please make sure that you look over the product that we have today and change things to a point where there are more homeownership opportunities. I've lived in that neighborhood for 40 years. Mayor Barry was one of the gentlemen that put together the Bates Area Civic Association and that information on that area. That area is an area where we were able to build that neighborhood up, and also Hanover Area Civic Association with home ownership opportunities. Those opportunities gave our residents the opportunity to own their own home and be more progressive in what they did for the District of Columbia. So I'm hoping that you will revisit the documents that you have to ensure that residents in Washington, D.C. have more than less opportunities to purchase their home. And I like the concept of single-family housing versus condominiums, because condominiums are perpetual and can make sure that the residents are not displaced after so many years.
Thank you for your testimony, Commissioner. I have just a couple of questions. I appreciate the concerns you raised, Commissioner. Sincerely, having known you as long as I've known you includes going back to before I was actually on this council, you definitely have been an advocate for that community in and around this property around Langston Slater. I know how you've advocated to keep the community safe, and I also appreciate you today mentioning the need for more homeownership opportunities. I will say though, we're in December 2024. I believe this project was originally the RFP, if I recall correctly, went out in 2020 and was awarded in 2021. Is that correct? I don't know if you had a chance to attend any of the meetings, any of the sessions, because there are under the code, the department, the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and their office are required to have public engagement around these projects. And I was a Ward 5 council member when this was awarded, so I know there was public engagement. Did you have a chance to make those types of suggestions that you're suggesting today during that process?
Well, yes, I've been involved in that neighborhood. I've been an ANC commissioner for 20 years. So I was an ANC commissioner when we brought the House of Lebanon on. And I noticed that one of the partners here will be on this project. We have had so much trouble with that site. We have had stabbings, killings, just a numerous amount of activity on that site. And we would like to make sure that we stabilize the Truxton Circle neighborhood versus just provide housing. So please take.
Let me make sure I understand. You said stabilize as opposed to just provide housing.
Yeah,
I
it's
thought you were
just
asking-
provide a lot of rental housing. Rental housing has been a sore spot in our neighborhood because people don't buy in. When you buy into a neighborhood, you buy into cleanups and all the different type of things
So you're
that go on.
suggesting homeownership versus multifamily?
Yes, I would like to see more. I'm not saying all of it has to be because tenants need places to live also. But I would like to see a large amount of those units go to homeownership opportunities. Now, we had an ANC meeting last night, and they were very concerned about the fast track of this facility. You know, it's going so fast.
I don't think that's accurate.
No. I mean, as far as moving forward with housing and giving the residents in that neighborhood an opportunity to look through your plan and come up with some ideas and solutions for that.
The project was awarded in 2021.
That is true, that it was awarded, but then everybody has asked me ever since I started the ANC commissioner, when is Slater Langston coming up? When is Slater Langston coming up? All of a sudden, we seen it 2 months ago, and we started working on it, and we didn't get to have a meeting with the community on that project.
Well, let me stop, because I'll ask, when DMPEG comes up, the representative, I'll make sure I ask about the community engagement in the meeting, but let me turn
The
to,
engagement.
let
That's
me
what-
turn to Ms. Goring Devaney and ask specifically your recollection about the community engagement process and specifically any meetings that you attended or any representatives from the development team.
So as you indicated, the RFP came out in 2020, September of 2020, and there was an extensive amount of community engagement that occurred at that time. We met with the ANC, we met with the Bates Street Civic Association, and we were ultimately awarded the project based on our proposal, which included both the rental and for sale infill component of the project. Since then, if you recall, ARE, Community Child Development Center, was located at the site. And part of the reason it took so long for us to get through the process was that we had been in discussions with ARE to determine if they were going to stay on the site or if they were going to relocate, which they ultimately decided to relocate and leave. And since that time, we've been working with the district to get through the process to get here today. I reached out to Commissioner Robinson Paul recently. She expressed her concerns about wanting the project to be include more for sale units, but just based on our concept plan, that is not feasible based on the way the site is laid out.
What's the mix right now? If you could just.
Sure, we're going to have 50 rental units, which will be included in the renovated Langston and Slater schools, and then 12 infill units in a new building that's going to be compatible with the historic component of that site in the community.
And for sale, how many?
12,
12.
yes.
Got it.
It's going to be an infill building between the two schools.
Okay. And in terms of the timeline for delivering the multifamily and delivering the for sale units, are they on the same track, or
Yes.
will one part be delivered first?
There'll be some staging, but they are relatively on the same track. There might be about a 6-month differential between both of those projects delivering, but they are tied together in one LDEA.
Okay. And you have some others who are here with you on the redevelopment team,
Yes.
both of whom I know and both of whom I really appreciate their connections to the district and the work they've done with the Habitat for Humanity, DC, and the Douglas Community Land Trust. Talk about your roles, if you could, and if you could just mention your names for the record before you speak.
Hello, Congressman. It's great to see you.
Likewise.
My name is Susan Slater. I'm the president and CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. And we're thrilled to be part of this very innovative project. It's got many features that I think are an innovative concept. The partnership with the Land Trust is extremely important to maintain long-term affordability and stewardship of the home ownership units. And the mix of incomes, I think, will be very beneficial for the community as a whole. I think that Simone and CSG Urban have done a phenomenal job of pulling many of us together. And we've done many projects now with the Douglas Community Land Trust successfully. And so I'm delighted to be part of it.
Great. Appreciate that. Mr. Perry, good to see you. Talk about what your all's role is at the Douglas Community Land Trust.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Vaughn Perry with the Douglas Community Land Trust. I'm the Director of Equity and Sustainability. And ultimately at Douglas Community Land Trust, at the Land Trust, our goal is to make sure that we can continue to keep housing affordable for DC residents. And our role in this is not only like, how do we make sure that we can keep houses affordable into perpetuity for these homeowners, but also being able to provide that ongoing stewardship. I'm sure many of us know how challenging it can be for a lot of the condos that are across our city right now. And so one of the things that the Land Trust is going to do is work with the condo to make sure that they are in a good position to manage effectively, but we also provide a lot of support for the individual homeowners as well.
And did you want to?
I'd also like to add here today is Pastor Lionel Edmonds, senior pastor with the Mount Lebanon Baptist Church, who was the catalyst for bringing this team together, and Lee Goldstein, who's representing Volunteers of American National Services, who will be CSG's partner in the redevelopment of the rental component of the project.
Well, I know both of those gentlemen. It's good to see you both in chambers today. Have you been involved, Ms. Gorin Devaney, in projects of this type, these sort of joint ventures in the past, or?
Yes, so CSG Urban Partners has been involved in numerous public-private redevelopment projects in the District of Columbia. Currently, we're joint venture partners in the Northwest One redevelopment project further down on North Capitol Street. We're also partners in the redevelopment of the Housing Authority site, which is now the beautiful Iris building. So we do have extensive experience in partnering on these types of projects and specifically in this community.
Appreciate that. What kind of feedback beyond what we've heard today from Commissioner Robinson Paul have you heard from other members of the community, if any?
We haven't heard much. We haven't gotten much feedback from the community. I know when we were first selected, everyone was very excited about the concept of having not only the rental units, but also the homeownership units. But we have not heard a lot from the community since then.
Okay.
But we do plan to, as Commissioner Robinson Paul indicated, have a meeting with her and any members of the community. And I've reached out to the Bate Street Neighborhood Association to meet with them also at one of their upcoming meetings.
Has anybody reached out about community benefits? If so, are there anything that you can share? Any conversations being had about that?
No, no one's reached out about that.
Okay, all right. In terms of the CBE participation, what's the percentage of CBE participation? In terms of the development team, I should say.
So CSG, in partnership with the Mount Lebanon CDC, we're the master developer for the project, and we have an 80% equity participation in the project.
Okay. And you're familiar with the district's 35% subcontracting requirement?
Yes, we've
Any
already
concern?
entered into First Source and CBE agreements.
Okay, so you don't anticipate any challenges meeting those requirements?
None at
Okay.
all.
All right, and I think that's all the questions I have. I'm going to turn next to my government. I'm going to give Commissioner Robinson Paul any other thoughts before we move to our government witness on this. If you can hit the base of your microphone again, just turn your microphone.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have not met with anybody. As I said the other day, I spoke with Ms. Goring, and she said that she understood my concerns and that she would take those into consideration. But I really want to make sure that we have that meeting. You know, we did not get the opportunity to meet with the team before we came before your committee. And I think that's so essential. Whatever comes out of it, I will go with it. But I do want the community to have that engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I think the community should have that engagement, and I'm going to urge Ms. Gorin Devaney to engage more than you have. I know it seems like you've always been willing to in my past experiences with CSG Urban, and I also know Mr. Purry and Mrs. Slater very well and have worked with them in the past. In fact, I've helped to build a couple of homes over in Ivy City, working with Habitat for Humanity. So I know how they engage the community as well. And so I expect that engagement will happen after this hearing. Okay, Commissioner?
Fantastic.
Okay.
That's all I want is for my community to have a voice in what comes into the neighborhood, because when they leave, we fight to get MPD to do their job, other entities to do their job, to make sure that we have a safe community. Mount Lebanon is a unit of senior housing, and those seniors are petrified. Like, if you go over there right now, the gate is open, it's supposed to be locked,
Well,
but
how about I do this? How about I have somebody from my team, I'll go over there and check it out.
Check it out.
My experience is
I-
that most of the people there are not petrified. I think there has been some violence around that facility, to be clear. I've been down there.
Lots of
I've- I've-
violence.
I've witnessed some of it. But I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, because there are a lot of people who live in that community, a lot of people who live around that community. And I don't want to suggest that one building is the source of violence in a community that has a number of challenges. And I know that you're somebody who's worked tirelessly to address those challenges. In fact, I've done walks with you. I know we've done things around the community center there, trying to get additional programming. And so I appreciate your sincere concerns and want to work with you to make sure you're addressing them. So
And I love the seniors, and I am a senior now, so I had to move
Are
into
you? Okay.
another role, 76 years old.
Okay, all right.
But,
Appreciate that.
you know, and I want them to be happy in their last resort. That's their last resort, that housing. So it's
Yeah.
very important
Well, let's
that,
continue to work together on it. And I
Yes.
think we've heard, and I'd love to give Ms. Gloria and Devaney the last word about community engagement. Do you don't have any problem, and you plan to engage with Commissioner, as you will, others who would like to engage around this project?
That's correct. We,
And there's also the Hanover
Miss-
Area
Commissioner-
Civic
Commissioner-
Association.
Commissioner,
Okay.
Yeah.
you got to give her opportunity to speak, though.
Okay,
I was
but there are
turning it-
two associations over there.
I know them well, and I'm
Okay.
happy to make sure she knows them well. There are two
Yes.
community associations, civic associations that are
Bates.
there, both Bates Area Civic
Hanover.
Association and the Hanover Civic Association. And I don't think you have a problem with engaging with either,
No, we welcome community
as well as the
engagement.
commissioners who represent single-member districts
Absolutely.
across
Yeah.
that
And
community.
we look forward to working with Commissioner Robinson Paul and having the community meeting and working with both of those neighborhood associations.
And just for the record, I've had the unfortunate experience of being in the community after violence has occurred down there. And there've been a lot of great days where there is no violence in those communities that I've also been fortunate to spend in that area. But on some of the toughest days that I've had in that area, I've had people standing with me, a lot of them, including yourself. But also Reverend Evans has been one of those people who've been standing with me and witnessed some of the horrific tragedies that we've had to experience in that community. So I wanted to just put that on the record before we move on to our government witness. So thank you each for your testimony this morning. I'm going to turn next to our government witness.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. We can have the representatives from the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development who plan to testify come forward. And if I could get you to raise your right hands before you're seated, as is the policy of this committee, we swear in everybody for your testimony. Do you each swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you each. You can be seated. Good morning to you both. And once you are all settled in, you begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson McDuffie, members and staff of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. My name is Pam Frenselbeim, and I am the Director of Real Estate within the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. Joined here today by Patrick Smith, Development Manager at DEMPED, and I'm here to testify in support of B25-0838, the Langston Slater Surplus Declaration and Disposition Approval Act of 2024. The approval of this bill would declare a surplus and authorize the mayor to dispose of District of Columbia-owned real property known as Langston Slater, located at 33 and 45 P Street Northwest, and known for taxation purposes as Lot 0287 in Square 0615, the property. I would like to thank you for holding today's hearing and recognize the invaluable contributions of the community, particularly past and present commissioners of ANC 5E, residents of Truxton Circle, Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker and his staff, the Bates Area Association, the Hanover Civic Association, and the many other neighbors and community members who have been active in making the Langston Slater redevelopment project possible. The property, located at 33 and 45 P Street Northwest, consists of a rectangular-shaped lot of approximately 30,000 square feet in total land area, bounded by Bates Street to the north, North Capitol Street to the east, P Street to the south, and First Street to the west. The property is within the Mid-City East Small Area Plan, which plan denotes the property as providing an opportunity for infill development and new housing. The property has excellent multimodal transportation access with its proximity to Metro Rail stations and multiple Metrobus lines. It is within walking distance of the Green Line Shaw Howard University Metro Rail Station, the Red Line Noma Gallaudet University New York Avenue Metro Rail Station, and it is adjacent to the current 80 and P6 Metrobus lines. It is also within a mile of Union Station, Howard University, and Howard University Hospital. Union Market and a Harris Teeter are both within approximately 6 blocks, and there's a Giant grocery store 8 blocks away. In 2020, the district completed a competitive solicitation process to select the developer for the property. The request for proposals, or RFP, was the first DEMPED equity RFP issued and included the following community-focused requirements: maximize equitable development opportunities, maximize affordable housing, and improve the quality of life in the surrounding neighborhood. The RFP was issued on July 14, 2020, with responses due on September 14, 2020. The deadline was amended and extended to September 30, 2020. DEMPED received 10 responses. DEMPED hosted a surplus hearing and a disposition hearing in the community on February 11, 2021. Due to the continuing COVID-19 pandemic emergency, both meetings were held virtually with the disposition hearing immediately following the surplus hearing. Following the hearings, DEMPED received a resolution from ANC 5E on February 26, 2021, with specific requests and recommendations that they wished to see in the winning proposal. On April 20th, 2021, DEMPED selected the development team, Lebanon Village at Langston Slater, MD, LLC, to exclusively negotiate for the disposition and development of the property. Lebanon Village Langston Slater is comprised of CSG Urban Partners, Volunteers of America, Habitat for Humanity, Mount Lebanon CDC, and Douglas Community Land Trust. CSG is a minority and women-owned certified business enterprise, disadvantaged business enterprise, and a resident-owned business. Mount Lebanon is a community development corporation. The proposed development will restore and preserve the 2 designated historic buildings while providing a 52-unit development, including 40 rental units in the existing buildings and a 3-story infill new construction building of 12 for-sale condominium units, including 7 affordable and 5 market rate units. 60% of the 40 multifamily rental units will be affordable, with 5 units affordable to households earning up to 30% of the median family income, or MFI, 12 units affordable to households earning up to 50% MFI, and 7 units affordable to households earning up to 80% MFI. The for-sale development will be 58% affordable, with 2 units affordable to households earning up to 50% MFI, 3 units affordable to households earning up to 60% MFI, and 2 units available to households earning up to 80% MFI. The housing program exceeds the 30% affordable housing requirement of the DC Official Code 10801 and satisfies the district's policy goals of providing a well-balanced mix of affordable units, with more than half of the units being family-sized 2- and 3-bedroom units, and providing homeownership opportunities. The affordable for-sale units will be in a land trust, and its owners will receive supportive services managed by the Douglas Community Land Trust. The development will also restore and preserve the 2 historically significant school buildings built in the late 19th century to serve Black children. The proposed development is projected to create approximately 12 permanent jobs for DC residents, over 189 temporary jobs, and approximately $5.3 million in permanent tax revenues over 30 years. In moving the project forward, DEMPED is proud of the opportunities to generate housing, economic activity, and jobs in the Truxtun Circle neighborhood. Thank you for your time and consideration of the legislation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I have some questions for you, a couple based on your testimony, and another that I prepared prior to hearing your testimony this morning. But I'm going to begin with just, you were here, and I think you had the opportunity to hear the public witnesses testify. Is that correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. And I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the concerns raised by Commissioner Joyce Robinson Paul, namely sort of the unit mix. She would like to see more for sale homeownership opportunities at the site. We had Ms. Warren Devaney respond to that, but I wanted to give you, as a representative of the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, who went through this process, to respond to those concerns.
Sure, thank you. First of all, on the public engagement side, we, at the public meeting that was held for the disposition and surplus, that was held in February of 2021, there were 5 attendees, 2 of which were DEMPED employees. No public comments were received at that time, and no written testimony was submitted. Further, we did receive a resolution from ANC 5E, and they noted in their resolution that between January 29, 2021 and February 12, 2021, 18 residents of SMD ANC 5E05, all living within a few blocks of the Langston Slater site, provided input directly or through the Bates Area Civic Association or the Hanover Area Civic Association, expressing their preferences among the features in the various proposals presented by the 10 RFP respondents. And they did ultimately support the selection of the selected developer. And yeah, I appreciate Ms. Goring Devaney's note that she will continue to engage with the community during the process as they continue through pre-development and eventually to construction start.
Thank you for that. As I alluded to earlier about the timeline for this project, I got to tell you, the community and I, as the former representative of Ward 5 and now at-large council member, have been waiting for this project for many years. What is the development timeline if we assume that this bill moves forward to council passage early next year?
Yeah, assuming council passes the legislation early next year, we will sign an LDA. The developer will then pursue approvals from HPRB and pursue a map amendment. And once it secures its zoning, it will go out and secure financing. That will probably happen in mid-2026, with a construction start following in hopefully early to mid-2027.
Okay. So we're still some time away from actually seeing or breaking ground on a project like this. So I think it's important for the community to understand. This is one part of the process, a very important part of the process, but there still is an opportunity for people who have interest to understand what this project entails. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So this project has some unique features that are referenced in your testimony. It was probably 5 to 6 years ago when I worked with my team to come up with a concept around a program which later became known as the Equity RFP. And thanks to working with my office, my former chief of staff, Marisa Flowers, and working with Mayor Bowser and some of your predecessors, they awarded some of the projects under the Equity RFP framework. And so I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about that Equity RFP framework and how many awards DIMPED has made approximately at this point.
Yeah, I believe this was one of 5 equity RFP awards.
I believe it was the first of
That's-
the awards.
Yes, you're right, Councilmember. Yes, this was the first award. The other 4 are Malcolm X, Hill East Phase 2, St. Elizabeth's Parcel 7, 8, and 9, and the Reeves Center. Of those, Malcolm X was awarded, Hill East was awarded, St. E's was awarded, and Reeves was also awarded.
Got it. Okay. This project also has a broad range of development partners, and I talked a little bit about that with Ms. Gorin Devaney earlier. They're working toward, I think, some higher thresholds of affordable units, both for rent and for sale. What, if any, lessons has DIMPED learned from this process that can carry over for future affordable housing developments?
Let me make sure I understand your question.
Sure.
The question is how this project has informed our approach to delivering affordable housing.
Yeah, I think this is a fairly unique with partners in terms of the joint venture that they have and both the makeup of the development team, but also the type of project that both has the for sale units as well as the rental units. Just understanding how you all I've learned from that process and what, if anything, might carry over to some of the other projects that could be on the horizon.
Yeah, thank you. Well, one thing I really appreciate about this project and this team is that it takes a very creative approach and a collaborative approach, both with the community stakeholders, with the development team. And I think in this economic environment, it's really important to have a creative approach and be able to utilize different sources of funding for various housing types. And I think this is a good model of that, where you're combining the adaptive reuse, you're combining homeownership, you're utilizing several different sources of financing to accomplish the goals of providing this level of affordability at this project.
No, I think it is pretty unique. I'm curious, though, if you have any other projects like this on the horizon with any of the recent awards that have been made, although there probably haven't been a lot of recent awards made. There've been some made a little while ago that are just, I imagine, hopefully getting to the point where we'll see more dispositions up here before the council. But are there any barriers to more projects like this that include both for sale and for rent affordable housing development?
Financing, I think, is always a barrier. And Again, it speaks to the need to be creative and be able to access multiple sources of financing to be able to get these projects underwritten and started.
And then how are you all thinking at DMPID about for sale housing in this climate? Are you thinking more generally about that? I know Ms. Robinson Paul specifically would like to see more in this project. I'll note that there is some that is currently being built not too far up the street on the side of McMillan, where EYA is developing a number of townhomes there. But how are you all thinking about for sale housing, particularly affordable housing in this climate?
Yeah, I mean, I think homeownership and Black homeownership in particular remains an important policy goal. Homeownership right now is probably slightly more feasible just because of the constraints on financing and subsidy availability for rental housing. And so homeownership will increasingly be a product type that is likely to be able to move forward on a slightly quicker timeline than rental housing right now.
Okay, and just in terms of community feedback on this project, any other things you want to share about what the experience has been? You noted the required community meeting that occurred, I believe you said, in early 2021. Are there any specific outstanding concerns that you're aware of or are working to address?
I'm going to let Patrick Smith address that question.
I recently took this project over about 5 months ago. Since then, I've been attending as just a general attendee to the Zoom meetings at the ANC 5E meetings in the background and listening to any community concerns so I can address them if they do come up. Unfortunately, last night I was unable to attend the meeting due to a prior engagement due to the holidays. So I didn't hear that concern, but prior to this, I have not heard concerns about Langston Slater. And of course, going forward, I will be attending as an attendee and if so invited as a panelist to the ANC 5E meetings.
Okay, all right, and just make sure you all are reaching out, as I've also asked Ms. Groen Devaney to do, and to engage not only the ANC, but also some of the Civic Association leadership at both the Bates Area Civic Association, as well as the Hanover Civic Association, that are both pretty active.
Of course, I will be reaching out and offering to come to their meetings as well as they would like further information. I'm available anytime by email and by telephone.
Okay, all right, and if you don't mind just stating your name for the record, I know.
Oh, sorry, I'm Patrick Pendleton Smith. I'm the project manager on Langston Slater with DMPID.
Okay, all right, and then to your knowledge, is this project and this proposed disposition in compliance with DC Code and all the laws around 10801?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any additional questions at the moment. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the record before I move on to the next measure on the agenda?
No, but thank you again, Chairperson McDuffie, for your time this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. The next measure on the committee's agenda is Bill 25-810, the Motor Vehicle Insurance Modernization Amendment Act of 2024, which was introduced by Chairman Mendelson on May 3rd, 2024, and referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on May 7th, 2024. As introduced, Bill 25-810 would update the district's minimum insurance statute to the level of It would also allow for the minimum coverage amount to be adjusted automatically based on changes to the Consumer Price Index, and also require insureds to elect underinsured motorist coverage or enhance underinsured motorist coverage. I don't think we've had anybody or any colleagues join via Zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and call up our public witnesses who have joined us in person, and will also migrate the Zoom witnesses over, and I'll call them after we hear our in-person witnesses. So I'm going to make a call. Deborah O'Garo Kelly. Actually, I'm on the wrong bill. Sorry about that. Oh, no, you signed up for both bills. Samantha Trumbull. Michael DeLong. You come on up. Thomas Glassick. Jessica Hart. Good morning to each of you. Thank you very much for joining us here in person. We're going to start with testimony. Let's just do an order from my left and your right. We'll start with Jessica Hart.
All right. Good morning. My name is Jessica Hart. I'm testifying on behalf of the DC chapter of Families for Safe Streets. Our mission is to confront the preventable epidemic of traffic violence by advocating for life-saving changes and providing support to those who have been impacted by crashes. I'm the mother of 5-year-old Allison Hart, who was killed by a driver on September 13th, 2021, as she rode her bike in a crosswalk in a school zone. Councilmember McDuffie, you were there that night. You saw the shock and the agony on mine and my husband's faces as our daughter lay dead in the street 1 block away under the glaring flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. So it might surprise you that I could consider my family lucky. Allie was dead in the crosswalk. We didn't have expensive medical bills for surgeries or ICU stays. We didn't have to find specialists or pay for medications to help her. She wasn't paralyzed, so we didn't have to buy expensive equipment or make drastic changes to our home and her environment to accommodate mobility aids. Allie was 5 years old, so she obviously didn't have an income. We didn't have to figure out how to make ends meet on a single paycheck. We didn't have to try to pay any of those medical expenses on one income. We didn't have to fear losing access to group healthcare coverage because our qualifying loved one could no longer work. We didn't have the financial rug pulled out from under us. Of course, we're not lucky. We are deeply, deeply unlucky. My joyful daughter is dead. We have our own grief and suffering to contend with, jobs to muddle through, therapists and psychiatrists and funeral bills to pay. I believe it is a deeply flawed and perverse system that could allow a grieving mother to even begin to consider herself lucky that her family didn't have to face financial hardship because her child died. It is a deeply flawed system that puts the economic burden of recovery on the victims. It is a deeply flawed system in which a driver can seriously injure or kill another person and walk away with little to no financial consequence, either to the driver or the insurance company. Too many people in DC are living with the double trauma of traffic violence and economic hardship brought about by inadequate compensation to victims. It is unfair, it is inequitable, and it is deeply unlucky. Fortunately, this committee has the opportunity to correct that. And so I urge you to pass the Motor Vehicle Insurance Modernization Amendment Act with the urgency that victims deserve. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Hart, for taking the time down to provide that testimony and really sharing what I know is deeply personal and traumatic experience about your daughter. Yeah, it's important for this committee to have this type of testimony. We're considering these important measures before. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Next.
Mr. Chairman, members of this committee, my name is Tom Glassick. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Insurance Federation. We'll be submitting testimony for 3 bills today, but I'll move to the one that we've just started. It's always nice to be in the position of the DC Insurance Federation, mirroring a lot of the comments of DISB, which we will hear later. One of the concerns that the DC Insurance Federation has with the legislation, and it seems to be shared by DISB, is that it will increase premiums for probably the least fortunate drivers in the District of Columbia. We have informal surveys showing that almost 30% of the drivers in the District of Columbia have just the bare minimums. So increases to those bare minimums is going to necessarily increase costs. There's some very, very good information about how that's been happening in different places around the country. I will point out that most of the survey information that we have about how these changes have impacted people around the country all predate COVID. Your office has reached out to me more than one occasion, and several members of the council reached out with their constituents. Actually, several members of council asked me about their personal auto insurance bills going up. A lot of the numbers that are in the AHA materials that were submitted are drawn from good data, but pre-COVID data. And I would definitely want to draw attention to the fact that we do not know. I mean, right now, people in DC are seeing increases, in the mid-teens, not a couple of percentage points, which is a lot of what the AHA is showing. So we're concerned that the different landscape between now and what was pre-COVID, combined with the fact that the District of Columbia has a significant portion of policyholders who are just now buying the minimum. So if you double the minimums, there's just no way that doesn't cost more. I mean, I went to law school because I can't do math, but there's no way you can't have people buy twice as much of something and it not cost more. And I do worry. We do have a significant portion of uninsured drivers in the District of Columbia. If people cannot afford these new limits, I worry personally as a pedestrian in District of Columbia that we see an increase in the uninsured motorist rates. I've made some other points in my testimony that also mirror what's in the DISB testimony. So I will give back 20 seconds.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Next. Morning to you. You can begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of the Motor Vehicle Insurance Modernization Amendment Act of 2024. My name is Samantha Trumbull, and I've been a resident of Ward 5 since 2012. Councilmember, I was born in 1986, the year that the current $25,000 insurance minimum was set. In 2012, fresh out of the Peace Corps, I moved to DC to start a career in public service. I had been in that role for all of 4 months when on September 23rd, 2012, I was struck by Christopher Swanson, who was driving his car at double the speed limit on Harewood Road right next to the Basilica. The injuries I sustained were life-changing. In the days and weeks that followed, I came to understand that my injuries would be lifelong, but the coverage to pay for them was not. After bargaining with an attorney to settle with my car insurance for only 5% of the total settlement instead of the industry standard 20 to 30%, I discovered that by some stroke of dumb luck, my husband had agreed to a vehicle non-owners policy when we went car-free that included underinsured and uninsured driver coverage. I was lucky. My initial hospital bill for just the first night in the ER, the bone setting, the CT scans, x-rays, and pain management was $26,000, already more than the current required amount of insurance coverage for DC drivers. That was before any of the half-dozen surgeries that were needed after, before I had my teeth root canaled again, and root canaled again, before 2020 when the dentist finally gave up on saving them and said I needed implants. Between my policy and Mr. Swanson's, I had $300,000 of coverage for the crash. $15,000 went to a lawyer, and more than $100,000 went to Blue Cross because DC is one of the states in which health insurance can take your settlement money through subrogation. I took home about $180,000, which was nowhere near enough. In the last 12 years, I've spent $10,000 to $20,000 per year on healthcare. Thankfully, as I get older, that number has declined, but as I get older still, I'm sure it will increase again. Even still, all of that payout is long gone. I'm 38 years old, and I'll hopefully live another 40 years. And I was a lucky victim. I had the best coverage that someone could have. So while I support this legislation, it doesn't go nearly far enough to protect victims. No one deserves to suffer this kind of injury, and they especially don't deserve the constant re-traumatization that comes with the financial stress of not being able to afford adequate medical care. I urge you to do more than this bare minimum protection. Increase minimum coverage to $100,000 per person and not per incident, and eliminate healthcare subrogation like our neighbors in Virginia have done. Let victims' wholeness come before insurance companies' profits. And to speak to my neighbor's comments, the least fortunate drivers in DC are still more fortunate than their victims. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Next.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Michael DeLong. I'm a research and advocacy associate with the Consumer Federation of America. We're a coalition of consumer advocacy organizations. We work to advance consumer interests through research, advocacy, and education. We oppose this bill. We think it will increase auto insurance costs for drivers in the district and lead to higher rates of uninsured driving, which means more fines and fees for low-income consumers and more uncovered crashes for everyone. The district requires drivers to purchase and maintain auto insurance, and by requiring drivers to purchase and maintain auto insurance, they're taking on a special obligation to make sure that it's affordable to its residents and to prevent unfair discrimination that drives up costs. This bill is going to increase the minimum required auto insurance to $50,000 bodily injury coverage per person and $100,000 per accident, and it connects the minimum required insurance to the consumer price index, meaning that insurance costs will go up even more. Increasing requirements, it's going to disproportionately hurt lower income drivers who are a lot more likely than wealthy drivers to purchase the minimum coverage because they can't acquire more coverage. And we think this bill is going to effectively hurt those residents. It'll require them to buy more insurance than they can afford, and so it'll impose rate increases on them. A lot of them will likely be unable to afford coverage. That will increase the number of uninsured drivers on the roads. We understand the importance of ensuring coverage for drivers who are injured in accidents, but the situation is going to become worse if more low-income drivers lose their insurance because of higher costs. So instead of this, we have a few suggestions. We think that the district should address market practices that leave lower income residents and Black and Latino drivers paying disproportionately higher premiums for coverage. In its recent study, the District of Columbia Insurance Department, they found that white drivers in the district pay an average premium of about $700. Asian American and Pacific Islander drivers pay an average premium of $722. Hispanic drivers pay an average premium of $849. And Black drivers paid an average premium of slightly more than $1,000, or about $326 more for insurance, a pretty big premium gap that we think should be addressed. A couple of suggestions. We think the district should work to eliminate the use of socioeconomic factors in auto insurance pricing and underwriting when insurers charge people higher premiums based on their credit score, their job or occupation, their education level, which results in a lot of unfair discrimination and disproportionately hurts lower income drivers. We did a report in 2020 and found that drivers with poor credit would pay on average over twice as much for auto insurance compared to drivers with excellent credit. Two other possibilities: the district could establish a lifeline low-cost auto insurance program to allow safe drivers who are lower income to buy minimum auto insurance policies. California has such a program. And finally, the district should continue its research on the racial premium gap in auto insurance and try to address disparities in the insurance market. Thank you.
Thank you each again for your testimony, and you all for sharing your personal stories. I want to ask, has everybody had an opportunity? I know we have your testimony. Has everybody had the opportunity to submit their written testimony? If you haven't, if you could.
Yeah, I absolutely will.
Okay,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Not yet, but we can submit it this afternoon.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. As you all know, DC is a multimodal city. and many residents commute by foot and bicycle. One of the things that I want to make sure the public understands is how minimum coverage standards affect pedestrians, cyclists, and all residents and visitors. The statutory minimum coverage levels are important traffic and safety policies to ensure that victims of traffic accidents are adequately compensated for the property damage and any bodily injuries. And I know for many residents, particularly those who are at home or watching, it's not simply a question of whether district limits need to be updated, because we haven't updated those, as was stated, for 40 years, but by how much and what mechanism we should install, if any, for future adjustments. So I wanted to give the public witnesses, if you'd like, the opportunity to weigh in. I thought I heard some specific suggestions, but I'd love to have you all restate those on the record, just so we have them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I stated, the $25,000 insurance minimum was set the year I was born, 38 years ago. Absolutely.
Doesn't make me feel any young, because I remember 1986.
I mean, me either. Adjusted inflation rate would be somewhere in the mid $70,000 range if we were just trying to go for the same level of coverage as was originally set. Given escalating healthcare costs, I think that that's still too low. So my on-the-record recommendation would be $100,000 per person minimum coverage for bodily injury.
Got it. Got it. Mr. Glassick, can the Federation provide any data showing where and per driver how much premiums have increased after minimum insurance coverage standards increase? And perhaps you can't do that in the district. I don't know if you have data from very long ago, but maybe there are other jurisdictions around the country that you might be able to share some data around where and per driver how much premiums have increased after minimum insurance coverage standards have increased. I'd love to understand that. If you can hit.
I believe a lot of that information is in the AJ materials, but I will see what we can find that is, I don't want to say more current, because the AJ materials were updated in 2024, but I will go back to my smarter people and see if we can get you some numbers.
I was not on this dais in 1986. I'd be interested to know what factors went into establishing that standard back when they did. It is 40 years later, though, Mr. Glassick. So after 40 years with the existing minimum standards in place, when, if at all, would you believe the Federation and other members of the Federation that these standards should increase to keep up with rising costs, inflation, et cetera?
I don't think anywhere in my testimony I said that they shouldn't increase. I'm just.
I didn't hear you say that.
Oh, okay,
Just be
okay.
clear.
Let's make sure.
Yeah.
I mean, things need to change, and I remember 1986 pretty well too. So it's been a while. I look forward to figuring out why those numbers were set in 1986 that way. I do know that quite a few other states still have those numbers. I do know that the proposed numbers only exist in Maine and Alaska, the 50 to 100. And the escalating clause would put DC in a unique situation of, probably leading the country in the highest possible limits. But I love the question about why we picked these numbers in 1986. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get you all of that by Christmas Eve, just because there's a couple of things going on this week. But this is clearly a bill that's going to take some time in the next session, and I look forward to working with you and getting as much data out there so we can all understand the question.
Okay. And then
I believe, sorry, that
sure.
that last year Virginia set $50,000 as a minimum. So I do believe that number exists in other states and one of our neighbors, in fact.
I think you're right about that. I also think, as my staff has reminded me, that it's supposed to start January 1 next year. So I appreciate you putting that on the record. I want to turn to Michael DeLong. You made some suggestions at the end of your testimony. You mentioned that you're going to submit that written testimony, but I want to give you the opportunity to just restate those on the record.
Sure. We understand the issues here, but we also think that rising auto insurance costs are a serious problem, that there's already too many people driving around uninsured, and we think this bill is likely to make that problem worse. To repeat our suggestions, we think that the council could do several different things. The use of socioeconomic factors in auto insurance, we've written reports on this and done a lot of analysis. We can send that to you, but basically auto insurance companies use a whole bunch of factors to charge people more based on your credit score, based on your education, based on your job or occupation, your gender, whether you're married, your homeownership status. And all those factors add up. Like you pay a penalty because you have poor credit. You pay another penalty because like you work at a low paying job. You pay a third penalty because you only graduated from high school. And that can result in insurance being unaffordable for consumers. And we've advocated both in the District of Columbia and other states for those factors to be banned because they're not connected to driving.
Has anybody banned them? Any state, any model around that?
Some states have. California, Hawaii, and Massachusetts, for example, have banned credit scores. I believe 6 states have banned the use of gender. Some states, including New York, have banned the use of education, occupation, auto insurance. We can put together more information and get it to you. So that's one idea. The other is to establish a low-cost auto insurance program. California has a low limits program like this. Basically, if you are a good driver and below a certain income level, you can buy this very basic auto insurance coverage that protects you and protects others. And it covers about 50,000 California drivers. It costs them about $400 per year. And it's a very good program. The issue is that it needs to be established. It needs initial funding, but we can send you more information.
What's the minimum coverage in California?
Don't remember off the top of my head, but we can get that to you. So, and the third is there needs to be more research on racism and racial discrimination and unfair discrimination in auto insurance, because this is a serious problem that, among other things, contributes to rising costs, and it's been neglected for far too long. So.
All right, I appreciate each of your testimony and for joining us here today. I'm going to turn to the next panel. Thank you. Jacob Leibowitz, Christopher Nace, Salvador Zambri, Daniel Hinkle. And good morning to each of you. Thank you for joining us here in person. We're going to start with Jacob Leibowitz.
Thank you very much, sir. Council members, my name is Jake Leibowitz. I'm a Ward 2 resident and have lived in the district for over 20 years. I'm a personal injury lawyer practicing here in the district. One of the things I love about my job is when I can help people who need our help, who need to recover for their injuries, who are in a bad place in life because of what's happened to them. And the satisfaction I get from helping them is why I do my job. Far too often, and one of the hardest things about our job is when clients call my office who are seriously injured, and I know that their avenue for recovery is limited because they've been hit by somebody who in all likelihood will have a state minimum policy, a district minimum policy. It happens over and over and over again. It doesn't matter how damaged they are, how much they have lost. If the driver who has struck them is carrying only a $25,000 policy, that is the most money they're ever going to see for their injuries, and it places these families in a very difficult position. One of the reasons why this issue is particularly exacerbated in DC is because we are a city full of young people. We are a city where people come after college, after graduate school to work in our district, to work for the government. Those people don't have cars. And that's what we want in this city. We want people to be using public transportation. Chairperson McDuffie, you mentioned this. We have so many people who come and they take the metro, they take the bus, they ride scooters now, which is another issue. They bike. All of those people, unless they have a parent who's a personal injury lawyer, they don't know that they don't have any protection through uninsured motorist coverage. They don't know when they get here starting their first job that if they're hit by somebody and badly injured, the most they're going to recover is that $25,000. And so I think this is important for us here in the district. I want to share three examples with you if my time permits, just to give you a sampling of clients I have currently. The first current client I have is a Miss Sarah. A 33-year-old was hit when she was 6 months pregnant when she was riding her bike in a bike lane in Noma. Car turned right, struck her, knocked her to the ground, fractured her elbow. Terribly worried about her unborn child, rushed to the hospital, surgery on her elbow, $130,000 worth of medical bills from the surgery and the emergency visit to George Washington Hospital. She was out of work. She was, as I said, her and her husband were absolutely terrified about their baby. The baby is fine. She is not. $25,000 was all the driver who hit her carried. That is the most she can recover. For those people who don't do what we do, they don't know that that $25,000 actually means there's an attorney's fee that comes out. You have to pay subrogation to the health insurance. She's going to get $8,000 for having to go through a broken elbow while carrying her baby, while worrying about her baby. That's just not fair. Another one is Ms. Cherie, longtime resident from Ward 6, mother of 5, badly injured in a vehicle collision which required spinal surgery. Same thing, $25,000. Her recovery is going to be less than $8,000. I know my time is over. I had one more example if the council would permit it.
I'll give it to you in my round of
Okay.
questions, sure.
Thank you, sir.
Next.
Good morning, Chairman McDuffie. My name is Christopher Nace. I'm the chair of the Trial Lawyers Association of Metropolitan Washington, D.C.'s Legislative Committee. I'm also a past president of that association, a national officer with the American Association for Justice, and a past president of the National Civil Justice Institute. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today in support of Bill 25810, the Motor Vehicle Insurance Modernization Amendment Act of 24. I've attached a letter of support by an alliance of organizations, many of whom are here today, to my testimony that's been submitted. The alliance members are Mothers Against Drunk Driving, DC Families for Safe Streets, the Pedestrian Advisory Council, Washington Area Bicyclist Association, DC Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Council, the Institute for Safer Trucking, Coalition for Safer Trucking, and the Trial Lawyers Association of DC. I'm proud to stand with these organizations today, and I also note that ANC3D has voted to support increasing minimums as well. I don't need to go through all my testimony as far as what the limits are. I do know there was one comment earlier about the cost of healthcare rising faster than just inflation. The number, I believe, is in excess of $115,000. That's what $25,000 in healthcare in 1986 would equate to today. So even higher than simply the cost of inflation since that time period. So victims in DC face the prospect of recovering only $25,000 insurance proceeds. You've heard quite a bit of that already. I also point out that what we know is that when people miss paychecks, that makes a difference in their lives. So even 2 weeks off of work at a minimum wage, it equates to about $1,500. And that money is often not made up when there's medical bills and subrogation involved. I did want to note that the district is in some ways falling behind our neighboring states. Virginia, as you noted earlier, on January 1st, will go to 5,100 minimums, and North Carolina as well will go to 5,100 on January 1st. Opponents claim higher limits will drive up premiums. We've heard that. Studies show that increases have minimal effect on premiums. In fact, in Maryland, they raised their limits in 2011. The average annual premium rose by only $10 per year, or about 1%. Other states have had the same minimal increases. Raising limits has not been shown to increase the number of uninsured drivers, and I think that's important also. In fact, states with higher minimum requirements often report lower rates of uninsured motorists compared to those with low limits. For example, Maine and Alaska with 5,100, they have respectively 6.2 and 11.3% uninsured, where Florida, with one of the lowest minimums of 10,000, has 15.9%. So my time is up. I'll remain here to answer any questions you may have.
You can put a pin in that there, because that's one of the questions I was going to ask you based on the testimony that I heard from other witnesses. So I'd like to come back to
Yes,
that
sir.
question on my rounds of questions.
Thank you.
Next, morning.
Good morning, Chairman McDuffie. Salvatore Zambri, wearing my hat as a representative and a past president of the Trial Lawyers Association of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. It's my pleasure to speak in favor of this bill. The consequence of inadequate insurance limits is that the burden, therefore, gets shifted to victims who are already in a tough spot, and also taxpayers, including, of course, through the District of Columbia, through Medicaid and other services. So let's talk about the cost. $340 billion a year in our country is incurred because of motor vehicle crashes. Taking the year 22, and 9%, by the way, of that burden is taken on by local governments. That's a massive number. Let's take the year 2021 as an example. The District of Columbia bore $832 million in traffic-related expenses. Applying that 9% on average burden to the local government here, that's $70 million that taxpayers are paying, when the burden should be with the tortfeasor and its carrier. That's a devastating and massive amount of number that reflects an injustice. The madness should end. In this bill, well, I agree with the women who and others who made their comments earlier. 50 is not enough because of inflation, but we support it because it's a move in the right direction to keep the burden where it should be with the wrongdoers and the carriers. Now, opponents will say, and we've heard it this morning, that it's going to necessarily mean there's going to be significantly higher premiums. The studies don't show that, and the facts don't support that. Mr. Nace talked about what happened in Maryland. It was actually a $10.12 exactly increase in the premium. That's 84 cents a month. For all states, all of them in the country who did an increase, the 1 year change in premiums was on average 1.87% as compared to 2.14% for all the others that didn't do the increase. Over a 5-year period, there was an on average change of 2.43% of premium increases in the states that did the higher limits compared to 2.57% for the other jurisdictions. And looking over a 14-year period from 2007 to 2021, the annualized change in premiums in states with increased minimums was 1.47% on average compared to 1.95% nationally. The threat of increased premiums becoming a hardship for the district residents, Chairman McDuffie, is simply unfounded. And why? The insurance companies know it. And to their credit, on average, they weren't increasing them more. Per AM Best, property and casualty insurers reported record net income of $88 billion with a B in 2023, more than doubling their profit in 2022. And at the same time, they increased premiums by 10%. There was no crisis. I have much more in my written submissions, and I would ask the council to please read them, and thank you for the opportunity to be before you.
And thank you for your testimony. Have you already submitted those?
I don't believe they were submitted yet. Possibly they were, but I'm going to double check that as soon as I.
Yeah, if anybody hasn't yet submitted their testimony, we'd love for you all to do that so we can incorporate it into the record. And our final witness on this panel. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and members of the council. My name is Daniel Hinkle. I work for the American Association for Justice, but I speak today on behalf of the Trial Lawyer Association of Metropolitan Washington, D.C., in strong support of the Motor Vehicle Insurance Modernization Amendment Act of 2024. As we've heard, for 40 years, the district's auto insurance minimum requirements have failed to keep pace with rising costs. The specific harms that this has caused have been testified to persuasively already. I want to focus on the big picture and pull out the big picture harms that this has caused. We just heard nationwide motor vehicle crashes cost over $340 billion a year. That's 2019 data. I'm sure that's gone up since then. But the current insurance policies cover only about half of those expenses. Who pays the $170 billion that's left? Mostly the families in need who are harmed in car crashes. Also, health insurance providers, healthcare providers, charities, taxpayers, all of these are forced to fill the gap. This uncovered care or this uncovered liability is going up as well. AM Best, a statement from recently showed that the number of uncovered liabilities has doubled since 2018 alone. Despite fears that raising required minimum levels of insurance will increase costs on consumers, the data is clear that raising minimum insurance requirements does not increase average driver premiums. Research that our team just updated in 2024, in December 2024, and is included in my testimony, and I've submitted it on the record, shows that these rates do not spike when states have increased their auto insurance minimums. And in fact, premiums raise more slowly than the national average if you have higher minimum insurance requirements. The rates of uninsured drivers do not rise either. We looked at that at every state that's passed auto insurance minimum increases and shown that that does not happen. For example, when Maryland raised their rates in 2011, the rate of uninsured drivers actually fell within the state in the following years. The fears about widespread premium hikes are simply not true. Instead, we see the property casualty insurance industry raising prices unilaterally at a time of extraordinary profits. 2023 was the most profitable year ever for the property casualty insurance industry, and 2024 is blowing it out of the water. The property casualty insurance industry has already reported $130 billion in profits this year, and we still have 3 more months of data to go. Updating these requirements is about making sure everyone is treated fairly and given proper financial protections. If a district resident is hurt in a crash, they shouldn't be left scrambling to cover medical bills and vehicle repairs. Neighboring states, as already been testified, like Virginia, as well as North Carolina, California, and others are already raising their insurance minimums. The district should join them. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. Thank each of you for your testimony this morning. Let me go back to Mr. Leibowitz. I believe you wanted to give one more example.
Your Honor, sorry, used to be in court, Mr. Chairperson. Yeah, the last
Spend a lot
example.
more time in court than you do with this council.
For now. Yes, the last example was actually a little bit personal. It was a young lawyer in town, not me, who was hit by a taxi cab in 2009 when she was crossing P Street at 16th in Northwest DC. Fractured her shoulder, was a civil rights attorney for the government, missed a lot of work. That burden of lost wages falls upon her and the government. Taxis were only required to carry the minimum insurance of $25,000. She was a young person in town who did not have any knowledge that she should have underinsured motorist coverage or any avenue to purchase it. I was going to share it because it was a personal story. It's my wife, who was then introduced to me as a lawyer who would help her. She's the only person I know who's had a good outcome from being hit by someone with minimum
Is it
insurance.
marrying you?
That's the good outcome, for now at least. This problem has been alleviated in part because so many of the cars are ride shares on our roads now. Taxis play less of a role. Rideshare companies tend to carry, for a long time, carried $1 million of coverage. That waivers. But so the issue with taxis, but this would also help in that taxis would then need to carry increased insurance, and taxis, just put a lot of miles on the road, and there is no additional asset behind each taxi cab for people to recover from. So whenever anyone calls me that's been hit by a taxi, I just tell them they're only going to get $25,000 for this. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for that. I want to turn next to Mr. Nace. I believe you were, I should put a pin in your testimony. We were talking about uninsured coverage. And if you want to pick up there, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to the record.
Just 1 or 2 points. Thank you, Chairman. I think I was saying that Florida has one of the lowest minimums at $10,000, $20,000, and they have a 15.9% uninsured rate, whereas Arizona has nearly the same uninsured rate as a state. Arizona with similarly low minimums of $15,000, $30,000 has nearly the same uninsured rate as a state with 5,100, which is Arizona and Alaska, respectively there. So in states that have really, really low minimums, you have oftentimes higher uninsured than in states that have the 5,100, where those states tend to have more insured individuals. So there's just no evidence, there's no data that raising premiums leads to people being uncovered.
Mr. Zambri?
Just to underscore that, Chairman, the top 10 jurisdictions in the country with the greatest number of uninsured drivers on the road have 2550 in coverage. There is simply no correlation, let alone causation, between that limit, a higher limit, and a greater number of uninsured drivers.
Right. And I understand the points that you all have been making about the need to update the minimums, and earlier panel also testified about how it's long overdue. But I guess the question is the right policy simply to double the current minimums. I think a couple of you all talked about Virginia. What they did there, though, is a two-step increase, 3 years apart. Is that something that we should be considering here in the District of Columbia?
If I may, certainly that's something that we would be willing to consider and look at. I think one thing that's important is, regardless of how we get there, hopefully we don't go another 40 years before coming back and looking at the minimums again. So if we are going to do it in a stair-step approach, which can make sense, I would encourage us to consider doing the stair-step that keeps going, up with some increase, even if it's tied to some metric or if it's just a relatively modest increase. But what we don't want to do is deal with this issue now, come up with a good plan, and then have another 40 years go by before we think about it again. So certainly working in some sort of escalation over a period of time could be something that would make sense for the district.
And this bill proposes an automatic escalator. Is there any other jurisdictions that similarly has an automatic escalator for future increases?
Other than getting up to a recognized number, in other words, the way Virginia did it, I don't think so. I will say, though, that there are states where levels of recovery are increased from year to year, depending on certain types of cases that are brought. So it's not out of the ordinary to set some method to escalate a minimum so that you don't have to, so governments don't have to keep coming back and spending time on it.
Is there anything else that you all want to make briefly before we move on to the next panel? All right, thank you each. Appreciate it. According to the agenda that I have, the next witnesses for this measure are going to be joining us via Zoom. I have Jay Swiderski, Frank Harris, Nancy Egan, Matt Overturf, Trupti Patel, Commissioner, Carrie Christensen, all right. We will begin with Jay Swiderski. Good afternoon to each of the witnesses. You can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. The DC Pedestrian Advisory Council is a DC government body created to advise the mayor, council, and district agencies on how to improve pedestrian safety and accessibility. Thank you for this opportunity to convey the PAC's support for increasing insurance minimums for third-party personal liability and for regular increases in those minimums so that they keep pace with inflation and we or our grandchildren don't have to do this again in another 40 years. Pedestrians and other people traveling outside of motor vehicles are much more vulnerable to injury in a crash because their bodies are not protected by the armor of a vehicle or the various devices that protect vehicle occupants. The special vulnerability of pedestrians is illustrated by the available data. According to DC's Crash Details Table dataset, of more than 18,000 pedestrians involved in crashes, 77.6% were either killed or suffered some type of injury. That is, about 1% were killed, over 22% suffered major injuries, and more than 54% of pedestrians hit by a car suffered minor injuries. In contrast, more than 42 times as many people are involved in crashes as vehicle occupants, but they are less likely to be harmed as a result and much less likely to be severely injured or killed. Just 10% of vehicle occupants suffered minor injuries, less than 3% suffered major injuries, and just 0.06% of vehicle occupants were killed in crashes. This is not to diminish those injuries, but to point out the difference in the rates at which they're caused. Crash injuries cause significant physical and financial hardship for anyone injured, and the district's current minimums effectively transfer the cost of drivers' mistakes onto those harmed by those mistakes and their health insurance, private or public, and thereby to all of us, whether or not we drive. As the statement of introduction for this legislation points out, the value of the current insurance minimums has decreased significantly since 1986, particularly for healthcare costs. We want to highlight two illustrative cases in which pedestrians injured by drivers faced medical expenses significantly higher than the insurance minimums, but for time, I'll skip to the second one. A pedestrian walking in a crosswalk when a driver made a left turn into his path and struck him, causing multiple fractures, breaking both wrists, both legs, fingers in both hands, and his nose, and facial lacerations. His medical costs totaled about $339,000. But again, the case was settled for the insurance minimum of $25,000. The remaining costs were paid by private health insurance or Medicaid. The financial burden on crash victims has increased since 1986 as the value of insurance recovery has declined. In many cases, the cost of victims that are not paid by the driver's insurance are borne by the victim's health insurance. Those costs are then passed along to the rest of us in the form of higher health insurance premiums, higher Medicaid costs, and so on.
Thank you for your testimony. We really appreciate that. I'm going to turn next to Frank Harris. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us via Zoom. And you begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my name is Frank Harris. I'm the Director of State Government Affairs for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. Matt's here for one reason, actually multiple reasons. The top reason is you heard the horror of stories of victims of vehicular violence. And that is exemplary why we need to take action to make sure that victims have every resource available to obtain restitution and justice following a crash. And Matt is here today to remind folks, battle against drunk driving is far from over. In the district, there's been a 71% increase in drunk driving deaths since the pandemic. Nationally, drunk driving deaths are at a rate we haven't seen in over 16 years, with over 13,500 people dying every year in these crashes. And it was great that the council recently enacted the STEER Act to help to try to alleviate the issue of traffic violence, especially drunk driving. But more is needed, and more is needed on the back end. As noted before, $25,000 doesn't get victims too far in today's day and age. And this increase, as was noted, doesn't affect other policies typically. And at the end of the day, more needs to be done to protect the rights of victims. Because, what MAD does, we provide free victim services to victims of impaired driving. And just obtaining the money to deal with the aftermath of this and dealing with those costs is just one part of the horrendous burden. And if this could help alleviate that to some degree, Matt fully supports it. And I won't regurgitate what else was said by the supporters, but we are 100% in line with the victims of traffic violence. And this bill is far overdue. It's 40 years overdue for the district, and we urge the council and this committee to advance it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nancy Egan. Good afternoon. You can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
apologies. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Chairman McDuffie and other distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Nancy Egan, and I represent the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. Our members write 72.9% of all the private passenger auto insurance in DC. I'm testifying in opposition to this legislation as it places additional burdens on consumers who can least afford it, especially in these inflationary times. As you heard, this legislation would double the current auto liability limits for bodily injury from $25,000 per injury, $50,000 per accident, to $50,000 per injury, $100,000 per accident. This would make the district tied with the highest mandated minimum bodily injury in the nation, along with 5 other states as of January 1, 2025. So these are the most recent figures. Currently, 41 states have limits equal to or less than the district. And additionally, this has this automatic escalation provision, which would put additional burdens on consumers in DC, and then buried in the bill would also require the purchase of one of 2 types of underinsured motorist coverage instead of letting consumers choose to purchase this coverage. According to our survey of our top writers, which are 6 of the top 10, 29.4% of their policyholders carry limits below $5,100. What does this mean? When this bill becomes effective, those policyholders and your constituents are going to see their premiums go up, because this would be a mandated coverage instead of letting the consumer choose what limits that they can afford in the district. As we've already heard, the Insurance Research Council, DC currently has the highest rate of uninsured motorists in the country at 25.2%. And we believe this legislation would push that figure even higher. DC is ranked as the 9th most expensive area for car insurance currently, according to insure.com. And according also to the Insurance Research Council, DC has a 5.6 underinsured rate, the lowest in the country. That means 94.4% of all injury claims do not exceed the liability limits. The low underinsured rate means that most folks are being compensated appropriately for their losses. In addition, according to Insurify, rates for DC are expected to climb 19% by year end. I know my time is running out, but auto insurance costs have increased 18% countrywide since the pandemic, including prices for auto parts at 22%, used cars 31%, and car repairs at 23.4%. There is no question that inflation has been raising the rates of insurance across the country, and this will just add additional burdens to the consumers here in DC. I'm here to answer any of the questions that you have presented so far, and we will be providing a written testimony that further explains the section on enhanced and underinsured motorist coverage. Thank you for this opportunity, and we will be submitting written comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next is Matt Overturf. Good afternoon. You can begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair McDuffie, members of the committee. My name is Matt Overturf. I'm the Assistant Vice President of State Affairs for the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. NAMIC is the largest property casualty insurance trade group with a diverse membership of almost 1,500 member companies, including 6 of the top 10 P&C insurers in the United States. I appear before you today to express our concerns with B25-810 as introduced. I'll spare you the summary of the bill as we've gone over that, but in today's DC auto insurance market, policyholders have the option to purchase more insurance than the minimum limits and also have the choice to purchase the underinsured motorist coverage that works for them. B25-810 removes this consumer choice by doubling the minimum limits and mandating that consumers purchase underinsured or enhanced underinsured motorist coverage. These changes independently would create upward pressure on auto insurance premiums for policyholders in DC and combined have the potential to be disruptive to the auto insurance market as a whole. We have a shared interest in maintaining an accessible and affordable insurance market that eases the overall cost of insurance for DC drivers. Therefore, NAMIC is concerned that these proposed changes would adversely impact the cost of auto insurance for DC policyholders in a jurisdiction that already has the highest uninsured motorist rate in the country. And with that, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you again for the opportunity to be before you today.
And thank you for providing testimony before the committee today. Next is Commissioner Trupti Patel. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you, Chairperson McDuffie, for hosting this hearing so that I can enter my comments into the permanent record.
I think you may have accidentally muted yourself.
I didn't realize I was muted. Can I have some time back and restart? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie. Thank you for hosting this hearing so that I can enter my comments into the record. My name is Trupti Patel, and I am a third-term ANC Commissioner. I represent Single-Member District 2A03, which is the historic Foggy Bottom, and I'm the chairperson of ANC 2A. But most importantly, I am DC's longest-serving elected official that is a tipped worker. And I'm going to talk to you from the vantage point of being a tipped worker, a consumer, and a resident. I will submit my written comments, but I'm going to deviate from that. So I do support this legislation that is being put before your consideration. But I want to say I agree that it doesn't go far enough. I always do this in Councilmember Allen's hearing, so you get the privilege of being the second council member hearing that I do this to. So 7 years ago, I fell and I shattered my left elbow on a broken piece of sidewalk. And when that happened, I basically had essentially no savings. I had to sue the district to say, hey, I fell and broke on something that was your fault. And so one of the reasons why I'm testifying is even though I tripped on a broken piece of sidewalk, if I would have been crossing the street from work and a car hit me and I'm out of work and as being a tipped worker, my wages are shift to shift dependent. And if I had not had health insurance, the cost, according to my attorneys, was that I would have paid $200,000 out of pocket. My therapy alone, physical for 1 year, was about, I think, 20 or 30,000 that they estimated. And I bring all of this up to say that us not doing anything is sanctioned economic violence towards workers, residents, and consumers. And the fact that it's taken 40 years to get to this point just shows how powerful the lobbying industry is against this very vulnerable population. And it's on all of us to protect one another. And I know I got 10 seconds left. So stating this in a manner that would be most pertinent to you is that this is a business issue, sir. If workers like me get injured and I can't come to work, that impacts my operators' ability to staff and to accommodate consumers. And so it has a trickle down effect. If a reckless driver, crashes into a business and they have damage, and then the driver says, well, I don't have enough money to pay you, that impacts that business's ability to stay open, stay operational. So it has a trickle down effect. And, I, as a consumer, want to know if I get into a vehicle, a rideshare, that they can cover my injuries should I be injured in there. I'm a resident. I deserve to feel safe when I walk anywhere in this city. And I see I'm out of town. I really appreciate you giving me the flexibility to say what I needed to say. And I hope that you will also afford me the courtesy of allowing ANC 2A to submit a resolution of support once ANC 2A is able to convene next year. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Commissioner. We're coming to the end of the council period, so although the record for this hearing closes on December 24th, just for your awareness, Commissioner, if you'd like to be able to submit something, I know you'd like to be able to submit something from the ANC. I'm not sure if they're going to meet before that time, but I wanted to just let you know that. But if the bill is going to move, if it's going to have to be reintroduced in the next council period, so just for your information. I do want to ask, so I'll pose this question to Matt Overturf and Nancy Egan. How uninsured and underinsured motorist insurance coverage is structured, I think for the average resident could be pretty confusing. But it's also, I think, critically important coverage that most of the public doesn't fully appreciate. So I see how the enhanced UIM proposal is meant to simplify it, but Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking is going to testify next, and I think they'll make a good point that requiring carriers to offer both standard UIM and enhanced UIM could add more confusion to the public. So why shouldn't we just pick one? And what are the drawbacks of just offering enhanced UIM? I'll toss that to either of you.
Thank you for the question. Currently, uninsured motorist coverage is what's available but not mandated in DC. This type of coverage, if you carry limits, let's say of 100, let's just use 2550, and you have underinsured motorist coverage of 2550 as well. If you're involved in an accident and the other party does not carry enough insurance, let's say they are from another state and they only carry 1020, this is called the subtraction method. So whatever you've already received is subtract from your coverage, and that is the amount you would receive under your policy. So it usually matches your current limits of liability. Excess insurance is just that. It provides coverage above anything you've already recovered. So those are the two choices. The premium charged is obviously if you have more coverage on excess, you're going to pay more for that coverage. And this would be a choice for consumers to make. Let me just say, though, that this coverage is now being mandated so that a consumer no longer would have the availability to choose between those two coverages. It's saying that they must carry at least one. And so that would be an additional cost that would be put to the consumer. Speaking for APCIA, we believe that the offset coverage is adequate to cover this type of loss. And but if insureds want to pay extra money and then take the enhanced coverage, it would then be available. I hope that answers that clearly. I mean, underinsured motorist coverage is pretty confusing to anyone, and I agree with you that trying to explain that within 2 minutes is never something easy. And Matt, I don't know if I left something off, but if you wanted to add anything on.
No, I'll echo on behalf of NAMIC and our members what Nancy said. The only thing I'll add on the EUIM side, since we're talking about neighboring states, I believe the Maryland Insurance Administration is doing a study on the impact that enhanced coverage may have on premiums. I can't remember the due date on that. It's potentially next year. So just something to keep into consideration that, one of your neighboring states is looking at this impact directly.
And they have it. Yes, and to follow up with you, Maryland does have that ability. Consumers can choose between the two types of coverage.
Got it. Just really quickly before I move on to our government witness, for Nancy Egan, I think in your testimony you mentioned what percentage DC uninsured motorists there are.
Yes.
What number is that?
It's at 25.2%.
Okay.
That's over the period of 2017 to 2022. The IRC, the Insurance Research Council, looks at a 5-year period.
Got it. Do you have those numbers for Maryland and Virginia?
I do have them, but not right in front of me right this minute.
Okay.
I can pull them as well.
All right.
And
I appreciate it.
uninsured, and I will, and uninsured motorists, you can compare nuts and apples, and it's difficult to say, but you also have to look at the populace of the state itself and their number of people under the poverty level when determining, looking at how some impacts would affect certain populations versus populations in other states.
Got it. I appreciate the testimony. And if anybody has not yet submitted their written testimony for the record, I'd love for you to do so before the hearing closes on December 24th. Thank you each for your testimony this afternoon. I'm going to turn next to
Thank you.
Commissioner of the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, Karima Woods. If you and anybody else on your team who plans to testify can come forward. Swear you all in before you're seated. You can raise your right hand before you're seated. Thank you. Do you each swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you each. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for being here with us in person. Once you are all set up, Commissioner, you begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie, committee members, staff, and district residents. I am Karima Woods, Commissioner for the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, also known as DSB. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on Bill 25-810, the Motor Vehicle Modernization Amendment Act of 2024. The department regulates the insurance, securities, banking, and other financial services entities doing business in the District of Columbia. Our mission is threefold. First, to cultivate a regulatory environment that protects consumers and attracts and retains financial services firms to the district. Second, to empower and educate residents on financial matters. And third, to provide financing for small businesses. We accomplish this by regulating the district's financial services industry to ensure district residents have access to a wide array of financial services, products, and providers. We also work to sustain a district business climate that encourages fair and open competition. Bill 25-810 would make 4 significant changes to current law. First, it would increase minimum insurance limits for private passenger auto insurance from $20,000, $50,000, $10,000 to $50,000, $100,000, $20,000, and the minimum limits for uninsured motorist coverage for $25,000, $50,000, $5,000 to $50,000, $100,000, $20,000. Second, the bill would require automatic increases to these minimum limits every 5 years. Third, the bill would create a new enhanced underinsured motorist coverage in addition to the existing underinsured motor vehicle coverage. Finally, the bill would require the purchase of either the enhanced underinsured motor vehicle coverage or the existing underinsured motor vehicle coverage. A little bit about the increase in minimum limits. Auto insurance minimum requirements are established to cover those involved in an accident who are not the vehicle owner. Auto insurance minimum limits are typically stated as bodily injury liability per occurrence, bodily injury liability total, and property damage liability. There are currently 6 other states with the exact same limits as the districts: $25,000, $50,000, $10,000. And that's Delaware, New Mexico, New York, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. Many other states have similar limits. There are currently 2 states with similar limits to the proposed limits. That's Alaska and Maine, and none with higher limits than the proposal. Maryland's limits are $30,000, $60,000, $15,000, and Virginia's limits are $30,000, $60,000, $20,000. But Virginia's will increase to $50,000, $100,000, $25,000 beginning on January 1, 2025. The increase in minimum limits will result in an increase in cost for drivers who have chosen minimum limits. It is estimated that 30% of policyholders select minimum limits. As it relates to automatic future increases to minimum limits, the bill would require a $5,000 increase to each limit beginning on January 1, 2028. The department is concerned that this could quickly put the district in a position of having the highest limits in the country and the only one with an automatic increase. The department is concerned that this automatic increase could lead to an increase in premiums required of policyholders, potentially pricing residents out of auto insurance. Additionally, overseeing these increases would require additional capacity from the department. As it relates to the creation of new enhanced underinsured motor vehicle coverage, the bill proposes adding a second option for underinsured motor vehicle coverage with more protection. The current underinsured motor vehicle coverage, or standard coverage, provides for losses in excess of the liability limit of the at-fault driver up to the underinsured limit. That is, if the at-fault driver has $30,000 of liability coverage and the not at-fault driver has $50,000 of underinsured coverage, the maximum benefit available from the underinsured coverage is $20,000. This can be confusing to consumers, particularly if the not at-fault driver has minimum limits, which can result in no underinsured coverage being available in any situation where the at-fault driver has $50,000 of liability coverage. The enhanced underinsured motor vehicle coverage addresses this by making the underinsured coverage additive on top of the at-fault driver's liability coverage. In the example I just described, the not at-fault driver would always be eligible for $50,000 of underinsured coverage, regardless of the liability of the at-fault driver. The enhanced coverage also provides benefits to a survivor of a not at-fault driver. The department is concerned that having two types of underinsured motor vehicle coverage would be unnecessary, complicated, and confusing for policyholders. We suggest only requiring the enhanced coverage option. As it relates to required purchase of EUIM or UIM coverage, the bill would require insureds to purchase underinsured motor vehicle coverage in addition to the already mandatory uninsured coverage. As I mentioned, the department recommends only requiring one type of underinsured motorist coverage. During our review of the bill, the department identified several minor technical errors in the bill, and we will work with your staff to address those. The department supports the committee's goals of making the district a safer place to live, work, and drive. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony, Commissioner. I got a few questions for you. I will note in your testimony, the last paragraph, you said the department supports the committee's goals of making the district a safer place to live, work, and drive. I want to ask a more direct question, though. Do you agree that the statutory minimums need to be updated to reflect current medical care and vehicle repair costs and to provide individuals with assurances that they will not have to pay most damages out of pocket? In other words, do you support or oppose the bill's purpose?
Yes, I do agree, and I support the intent of the bill and the intent to update the minimum limits. There are other aspects of the bill that I oppose, but I do support increasing the minimum limits. We recognize, as it's been stated, that the bill has not been, with the minimum limits, have not been updated in 40 years. And we recognize that the minimum limits have not kept up with the cost of medical care, the cost of repairs for automobiles, and also inflation. So we do agree with the bill.
Okay. Residents continue to face high motor vehicle insurance premiums. I think you've probably heard from residents about this in the past. I know my office has heard from stakeholders prior to this hearing, as well as from witnesses today. And the chairman, who will all say that increasing the district's minimum insurance coverage would not increase insurance premiums. One stakeholder cited an analysis of industry data from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, which concluded that, I'm quoting here, drivers in states that have raised their minimum insurance levels have not experienced spikes in their auto insurance premiums, close quote. You note that this will raise premiums for district drivers insured who currently have minimum limits policies. Does Disney believe that this bill would raise premiums for drivers insured who have policies at or above the proposed minimums?
So from what I understand from the testimonies that I heard, some of the witnesses indicated that for states with the higher limits, the average of increases after the limits are raised is lower than those states with lower limits. We have looked at the data from the NIC study that was referenced, that you just referenced, particularly as it relates to the data from the state of Maryland, our neighbor. And when you look at that data from 2011 to 2021, the increase in premiums was about 2.3%.
That's 2.3% across the board, or is it?
Across the board.
Okay.
As a result of the increase in minimums. So I would say that I don't believe that anyone that testified for those district drivers with minimum limits, that their premiums would not go up if the limits are raised. There should not be an increase in premiums for those drivers that are above the proposed increased limits because of the increased limits. So those that already have increased limits, those drivers wouldn't necessarily, from what we have assessed, we don't see their premiums going up. It would be for those that are more so that have minimum limits currently.
Have you all looked at, or any data to reflect regionally what has happened? Maryland raised theirs back when, 10, 12 years ago?
2011, I
Okay.
believe.
Virginia, as you mentioned, there's a set to increase in January next year.
Mhm.
Is there any comparison data that you have about the rates for each of those jurisdictions, just to sort of juxtapose what the increases have looked like?
I have not come across that data, and my team hasn't shared it, but it is something that we would like to take a look at. I have looked at, as I mentioned, the data that reflects, it was not just the state of Maryland. There were a number of other states that the NIC assessed, but the state of Maryland, I did not see any data from Virginia, particularly because they initially increased their limits, I want to say in 2022. And as you've mentioned, they're set to increase again in 2025. So I haven't seen any comparative data in that sense.
I thought I heard a witness testify, and I'd have to, I don't know if any of my staff remembers, but I thought I heard somebody testify that in jurisdictions with the lower rates, that the rates, lower rates of insurance coverage, so something more similar to what we have, that their insurance rates have risen higher. I don't want to make that up. I think what's going to be important is to get the testimony from, I think it was a panel with the trial lawyers. They had some interesting data that I think contrasts what we heard from folks in the insurance industry. The beautiful thing is they're talking to each other, which is what was shared to me earlier before we started this hearing, because I'd love to understand more clearly and would look to DISB to help the committee understand more clearly what the trends have been, if any, in terms of increasing minimum coverage. What about the aspects of this bill, Commissioner, around property damage? Does DISB have any concerns with the property damage liability increase from $10,000 to $20,000?
No, we do not have any concerns with that.
Are you aware of any states that have an automatic escalator for the statutory minimum coverage levels?
As I stated in my testimony, the district is not, well, I didn't state directly, but the district is not aware of any other state in the United States that have an automatic escalator. And if we were to implement that provision in the bill, we would be the only jurisdiction in the United States with the automatic escalator. So we're not in support of that.
Thank you for that. So I appreciate your testimony on page 3 under the heading required purchase of EUIM or UIM coverage. Just one follow-up to your testimony. Does DISB recommend maintaining existing law around UIM or requiring an opt-in clause as Maryland provides, adopting an opt-out clause in the introduced bill, or just requiring EUIM?
So, as mentioned in my testimony, DISB is in support of only requiring the EUIM, which we also refer to as the enhanced coverage. We do strongly believe that it would be very complex for policyholders to be able to know which one to determine best for themselves. And so we don't necessarily want to have that complexity as it relates to two types of underinsured motor vehicle coverage. So we only support the enhanced coverage.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Just quickly, I want to pivot a little bit, but yesterday the council approved the Carrier for Hire Oversight and Enforcement Amendment Act of 2024. And although the final version included several improvements from first reading, you may be aware that I raised several concerns around its jurisdictional overreach, inconsistent regulation, problematic data collection, and that ultimately it will make it more difficult to do business in the District of Columbia. All that being said, I want to ask your perspective just on a few things. Does DISB know how many insurers currently offer insurance plans for for-hire vehicles or carriers for hire?
We are not aware of which insurers that offer insurance for commercial vehicle insurance. There are many insurers that offer commercial vehicle insurance, but we're not aware of which of those insurance might cover for-hire vehicles at this time.
And has DISB done any work in the for-hire vehicle or carriers for hire space? Do you believe that broader insurance reform that is inclusive of for-hire vehicles and carriers for hire can be addressed in this modernization bill or should be pursued separately?
So DISB has not done any direct work in that space. We do get a lot of questions directed to us, but at this time, we don't necessarily have any information about the insurance that is provided for hire vehicles.
And can you speak to can you speak to how delivery companies fulfill their insurance requirements and whether there are requirements for drivers themselves?
Can you repeat that question?
If you could speak to how many delivery companies fulfill their insurance requirements and as well, whether there are requirements for the drivers themselves?
We do not have any information about the insurance that is provided to the for-hire vehicle drivers.
Okay.
We could work on how we could go about getting that. I don't know if any of my colleagues here would respond to that question, but at this time, we don't have any information on that.
Okay. My final question, the bill we approved yesterday that I believe you're familiar with requires the director of the Department of For-Hire Vehicles to assess insurance requirements appropriate for carriers for hire. I guess I'm just wondering whether that's a function that you believe is best housed at the Department of For-Hire Vehicles or the Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking.
So the role that DISB sees itself playing is more from the perspective of providing subject matter expertise and not necessarily regulating in that space. And so we see that more as a function of for-hire vehicles.
So you expect for-hire vehicles should assess insurance requirements that are appropriate for care for hire?
We believe that the review should stay with the regulatory agency.
Got it. Okay. I don't have any other questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the record before I move on to the next measure?
I'll just add one thank you for the opportunity to testify about this bill today. We do strongly believe in the importance of making sure that our residents and drivers have the necessary protections to keep drivers safe, to keep our roads safe, and more importantly, to ensure the safety of district residents. So we do support this bill, and oppose aspects of it, but we do support the bill. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
And thank you for your time and testimony. The next measure on the committee's agenda is Bill 25-476, the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Act of 2023, which was introduced on September 18th, 2023 by Chairman Mendelson and referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on September 19th. As I mentioned, was introduced on September 18th, 2023 by Chairman Mendelson and referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on September 19th, 2023. As introduced, Bill 25-476 would enact regulations for peer-to-peer car sharing programs in the district, including clarification of insurance regulations and authorizing the mayor to promulgate rules. I'm going to call up the public witnesses for this measure. Deborah Ogaro Kelly. John Heath. Thomas Glassick. Addison Pruitt. John DeRose. Good afternoon to each of you. Thanks for joining us in person. I'm going to start from my left and your right. And each of you will have 3 minutes to testify. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Chair McDuffie and members of the esteemed Committee on Business and Economic Development. For the record, my name is Addison Pruitt with Compass Advocacy here on behalf of Enterprise Mobility. And to my left is John DeRose, also with Enterprise Mobility. We are here to urge a favorable report of the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Act of 2023. For over 60 years, Enterprise has served as a leader and innovator in the rental car market, serving customers' transportation needs throughout the globe with over 8,000 locations. And as new technologies emerge to access transportation, we certainly welcome and continue to support innovative methods that foster economic opportunity and environmental sustainability among the car rental industry in the district. This legislation follows suit to the near 40 states that have adopted policy as peer-to-peer car sharing continues to expand across the country. And as such, it's important that we adopt leveled and equitable regulations for all rental car providers to ensure consumer protection and transparency in the rental car and car sharing market. Members of the committee, we respectfully request your support of this bill with some modifications as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is John DeRose, and I represent Enterprise Holdings. As Addison just mentioned, we've rebranded a little bit to Enterprise Mobility, but parent company is Enterprise Holdings. We own and operate Enterprise, National, and Alamo Rent-A-Car, as well as several other business lines in the transportation industry. We currently operate 6 locations in the District of Columbia. Although at one time we had 11 in the city, it's our desire to be able to expand our DC locations again in the future. Over the past few years, approximately 75% of the U.S. has enacted rules to govern peer-to-peer car rental transactions. The rental car industry continues to evolve in ways that service can be delivered to the end user, the person renting the car. As the peer-to-peer industry emerged and entered the car rental market, there was an inconsistent or non-existent application of tax burdens, consumer protections, safety and privacy laws, thus the reason for this legislation. In this act, by excluding peer-to-peer from the definition of rental car companies, they are not subject to the 1% gross receipts tax in the district or the 9.25% car rental tax in DC. We believe this is not appropriate. Additionally, by defining this type of car rental transaction as something different than car rental, the peer-to-peer operators should not enjoy the protection of the Graves Amendment, which exempts them from the vicarious liability exposure, which would be the case in this bill's current form. The exact language in the federal law is, in general, an owner of a motor vehicle that rents or leases the vehicle to a person or affiliate of the owner shall not be liable under law of any state or political subdivision thereof by reason of being the owner of the vehicle or an affiliate of the owner for harm to persons or property that results or arises out of the use, operation, or possession of the vehicle during the period of the rental or lease. If, 1, the owner or the affiliate of the owner is engaged in the trade or business of renting or leasing motor vehicles, and 2, there is no negligence or criminal wrongdoing on the part of the owner or the affiliate of the owner. A peer-to-peer company is not a vehicle owner, and there is also no corporate relationship to establish an affiliate as the law was intended. In short, neither the peer-to-peer company nor the owner of the vehicle should be excluded from vicarious liability, as the law does not apply to either. All companies engaged in the business of renting vehicles deserve the freedom to compete in a marketplace that applies public policy related to the service in a fair and equal way. All state and local governments deserve consistent application of the taxing rules to a particular good or service, regardless of the delivery model. Enterprise has been exploring an opportunity to offer peer-to-peer car rentals. But Enterprise will play by the rules when it does so, paying its fair share of taxes, following the consumer protection, safety, and privacy laws that go along with making vehicles available for rent. In conclusion, we support the DC Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Act with amendments, fair tax provision, removal of the Graves Amendment protection, or defining the service accurately as car rental and regulating car rental service in a fair and equitable way. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Mr. Chairman, I'll spare you reintroducing myself. I'll be back for another bill after this. The DC Insurance Federation, in coordination with the AAPCIA and the dynamic folks who just testified for the previous bill, worked very carefully with the National Conference of Insurance Legislatures and COIL, I hate to use all these acronyms, in developing a model, the model piece of legislation that this is based on. This is a long negotiated amongst many state legislators, and we are completely supportive. I do know that the department has some questions about what liability, let's get back to the, what minimum liabilities would apply when the car is being shared or when it's not with the owner. We have no objections to working with the department and figuring out how best to do that. I will submit with my formal written testimony, we've got a state-to-state study of what other states have done in that space where the model has a bare minimum and other states have increased that or have actually mirrored their uninsured or their minimum insurance specifications. But I will have that in so that you can see all 50 states. I believe 26 states have adopted some form of this NCOIL model at this point. And I know much less about this than does Mr. DeLong. So if there are detailed questions, Mr. DeRose, if there are detailed questions, I would like to direct them to him. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Next.
Chair McDuffie, thank you so much for the opportunity. This is my first time testifying in this chamber. Mr. Kim, good to see you in person and not on Zoom. My name is John Heath. I'm the Senior Government Relations and External Affairs Manager for Turo, the world's leader in peer-to-peer car sharing. Here to testify on the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Act of 2023. This bill, with certain red line modifications that we submitted, we believe would set a great course forward. The bill does three things. Basically, provides a regulatory framework to operate peer-to-peer in the district, establishes a proper insurance framework. Also, it addresses consumer protection. Mr. Chairman, you're a homegrown product here. I used to summer here. The boom of DC construction and development is amazing, but there are so many people that still are wrestling with trying to afford living in the district. What does peer-to-peer car sharing offer is an opportunity to supplement those incomes, to help folks with medication, we've talked about housing and housing affordability, helps folks, whether they're renting or homeowners, to have extra income to apply to that. For young parents, I used to be one, now I have grandchildren. But hey, I remember those daycare prices. Certainly Turo helps even in that to support district residents in shrinking the wealth and income gaps that still persist. I always say that peer-to-peer is not a silver bullet, but it's certainly a tool in the toolbox. I also have my dear colleague, James Bangisser, with me, who's our ledge counsel. And between both of us, we can answer any kind of in-depth questions that you may have. But I thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'll give you time back.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you to each of you for your testimony this afternoon. Mr. Heath, you mentioned in your testimony you provided us with a red line, and it may have been some time ago. Do you mind just resubmitting that red
Yes,
line?
we'll make sure we have that, and also the testimony will be submitted to you as well.
Okay, appreciate it. And it actually might be beneficial. I've heard of Turo. I'm not sure if everybody at home watching has heard of Turo or are familiar with peer-to-peer car sharing. If you could just briefly describe what that is.
Sure. Our marketing folks used to hate this, but the easy way to explain it's like Airbnb for cars in that sense. Individuals, particular folks of lower socioeconomic arenas, people of color, it is the lowest barrier micro business enterprise that you can enter because many folks already have that car. With COVID, many folks have gone to remote work. So the car's just sitting there. And even with folks that are working, cars sit more somewhere around 90% of the time. So this allows a person to utilize a depreciating asset and then garner income by sharing that with other individuals that are visiting or live in the district. Real quick, during the pandemic, our colleagues in the rental car industry had a crunch. And then there were numerous issues where there wasn't perhaps an adequate amount of fleet available. Nurses that were going to serve in Atlanta, in Sacramento, they were able to use Turo while they were detailed in those areas. So it becomes not only an economic lifeline, but can also really be an actual lifeline in helping folks care for those who are ill.
I don't know if there are any numbers that you all share about just people who use Turo. I don't know if you have district-specific numbers around.
I can get back to you on kind of fast facts for the district and have that for you so we can be accurate with you.
Okay. Given, I think the model is fairly new for some folks to really understand that. That's why I wanted you to put it on the record. But I think it also might be helpful for the record to understand the types of problems that have cropped up under the existing regulatory framework, just specific concrete or novel issues that this bill is attempting to solve for?
Well, I think it's not so much problems for us. We embrace regulation, so we want to get something on the books. But the insurance framework is critical. We want district residents to be protected. Our model is a bit different. In traditional rental, perhaps you have the opportunity with many of those companies to not put up insurance. In our model, you have to select an insurance package. So the host, the person booking the car, selects an insurance package. And then also the hosts have an opportunity to have an insurance package that they select as well. So there's never a period where we have to worry about that booking not being covered by insurance.
Are there, I mean, we just had a bill talking about minimum insurance requirements. Is there a minimum insurance level that is required, Arturo?
May I?
Sure. If you could slide over, if you could try to slide all the way over though, and make sure you say your name for the record. I don't know if it's.
Thank you. My name is James Mangasser. I'm senior counsel at Turo. If I understand your question correctly, the standard as is in the model is always to set the coverage requirements to the same that's required for rental or any individual owned auto. And that's because fundamentally the risk profile is the same.
Okay. Maybe direct this to one of the other witnesses, but I understand that there's some concerns about there being no parity between car rentals and peer-to-peer car sharing as it relates to taxation and certain liability provisions. You touched on that in your testimony. I want to give you another opportunity, if you could, to talk about those, but also setting those issues aside for a moment. Do you have concerns about other parts of the legislation?
I think from the traditional rental car company perspective, and I mentioned this a little bit in my testimony, there's a lot of different ways to deliver transportation, and that gets, enhanced as we move forward every year, whether it's technology or different methods of delivering a transportation mode. I sort of look at it in two different buckets. You either are paying somebody to drive you around, which is a for-hire situation, or you are renting a vehicle to drive yourself. And there's lots of ways to deliver that. And we deliver ours in lots of different ways now too with technology. And, it's not just the brick and mortar standing at the counter renting the car. We do it all different ways. With the Turo model or the peer-to-peer model, we're certainly, welcoming them into the car rental industry. They are renting a car at the end of the transaction. It's just a matter of how they get to that point. But at the end of that transaction, there's a customer driving away in a rental car, and there's a company that's profiting from that. So we look at it and go, okay, if it's a car rental, let's define it as a car rental. And once you define it as a car rental, all the regulations, whether it's taxation, insurance requirements, customer service, or consumer protections, all fall into line. If we're going to have a parallel definition for this type of car rental, then we are concerned with the tax implications because it's an unfair competitive advantage. And a lot of the things that my new friend here, who I enjoyed meeting earlier, and I discussed, as we're talking about the person that has the extra car that wants to generate a little extra income, we think that's great. Our fear is that in practicality, this is happening, maybe not with Turo, but with certainly some of the other car sharing. People are starting rental car companies on these platforms. It's not the one guy with the car in the driveway. It's companies that are putting cars on the platform. General Motors has a platform. People are putting 10, 15, 20 cars on these platforms, not following the regulations if they're not existent. And taxation is the obvious example there.
Okay. I know that you wanted to respond. If you could just state your name one more time for the record. I didn't write it down.
Sure, it's James Bangasser. Bangasser. So I just wanted to clarify here, when we're talking about things like taxes, that rental car companies don't purchase, when they purchase their vehicles, they're not paying taxes on those purchases. So I don't know if you all own cars, I assume you do. You paid sales tax when you purchased that vehicle. Enterprise, the traditional rental car companies, they didn't. That's why states and rental car companies went to states and said, give us that exemption and we will collect a back-end rental car tax. That individual who's making money from their asset that's sitting in their driveway, they already paid the tax. So essentially what we're talking about here is double taxation. If a host, a vehicle owner, has paid, or excuse me, hasn't paid the applicable tax, they should be subject to taxes on the transaction. That's simply, when we're talking about parity, it's simply tax parity here.
And I'd also like to add, we did have a great chance to chat. Mr. DeRose and I will have to agree to disagree. Traditional rental still looks at us as rental cars, but I point to TNCs are not considered cabs. Airbnb is considered different than hotels. And so we can continue to kind of go around and round about that. They have their position, we have our position. And again, our hosts pay those taxes up front. So, and then I also like to say that those dollars really cycle locally because there's going to be local hosts that get those profits, and they get the lion's share of that booking, not the company.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So the sales tax on the purchase of the car comes up quite a bit. And really what it is, it's an accounting policy that's a like-kind exchange. So if you take, and it doesn't necessarily have only to do with rental cars, it could be a tool. If you replace that tool with a like tool and you keep doing that through your business, you don't pay taxes every time. It's really an accounting principle. As far as the other part of it with the host not paying taxes, we believe that, in their model, if the host were to receive a tax break, if you will, until they reach the amount of sales tax that they paid on their car, we'd be fine with that model. That makes sense to us.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we have no problem with that.
Does anybody else, any other jurisdiction approach it that way?
They haven't yet, but there's different tax situations around the country. For example, there's a tax rate if your fleet is less than 5 or 10 cars, and this is back to my point where people are starting a business on this thing. Beyond 10 cars or 5 cars, whichever the state has mandated, they pay the full tax rate.
Okay.
So
And you all don't dispute that people are using the platform and they have multiple cars that they are renting out on the platform?
We are certainly not trying to stop people from businesses.
Sure.
We're leaning into that.
Okay.
And so we want people to grow to the capacity that they can grow. In my written testimony, I talked about how the Marriott started with A&W. My great mentor, Kathy
They may have started
Hughes.
locally too.
Absolutely. Right here in the district on, I think, like 14th Street. My mentor, Kathy Hughes, sleeping in WOL and now turning that into a huge media conglomerate. So while we know that the most of our folks are going to be those mom and pops, we certainly don't want to stifle capitalism. In the words of my good friend John Hope Bryant, capitalism can save us if we do it right. And so we think we're doing it right.
All right, I appreciate that. I don't think anybody disagrees with that either. So I do appreciate the testimony. Just one last word.
Just on the tax question, yes, other states have done it. So Oklahoma simply says in statute, and this is pursuant to an agreement with Enterprise and Turo, if a host paid applicable taxes on purchase, there's no tax, there's no rental tax on the transaction. If they didn't pay applicable taxes on purchase, then there is a tax. That's all we've suggested here. We think that equates to parity.
Any response to that?
No, not necessarily to that, but can I make it just another point, circle back on the Graves
Final
Amendment?
point. Yep.
Yeah, final point. So in the peer-to-peer operators want the Graves Amendment protection, which speaks directly to renting cars to the owner. So we're fine with that, but let's define it as a rental car. They're renting cars. If they're going to say that they're sharing cars and they're not renting cars, then they shouldn't be entitled to the Graves Amendment protection.
Got it.
In my opinion.
All right. Thank you each for your testimony this afternoon. I'm going to go to our next panel, Daniel Hinkle, Christopher Nace, and I think those are the last 2 witnesses. And you back. And good to see you both again. And I'll let you begin. Mr. Nace, your testimony, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman McDuffie. My name is Christopher Nace still, and I am continue to be the chair of the DC Trial Lawyers Legislative Committee. I should note also that I'm the owner of a small business here in the district, our law firm. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on 25476, the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Act of 2023. I understand the convenience and growing popularity of peer-to-peer car sharing platforms, but I'm here to emphasize a critical issue, and that's the need for adequate insurance coverage to protect victims, drivers, and our community. The bill proposes that peer-to-peer car sharing companies assume liability, but only at the district's outdated minimum insurance requirements of $25,000. That is far too low to cover devastating financial consequences of serious accidents. In fact, the website of one prominent peer-to-peer platform states currently that every host plan comes standard with up to $750,000 in third-party liability insurance. That would not be the case if the pending bill became law here in the district. Just recently, in February of 2023, there was a catastrophic head-on crash involving 4 vehicles on Connecticut Avenue. It was caused by a driver in a peer-to-peer shared vehicle. 1 life was lost, and 7 other people were injured, some with very serious, severe injuries. The car's insurance policy issued through a peer-to-peer platform was limited to just $25,000 per person and $50,000 total, a fraction of the damage incurred in that case. So we don't want to lower our protections for the individuals in the district for the peer-to-peer situation. I should note that there are other jurisdictions. For instance, New York mandates $1.2 million in liability coverage for peer-to-peer car sharing. So that's quite a bit different, and we think more in line with the business aspect of these new networks. I would like to note also some of the unique risks that come with peer-to-peer vehicles that we may not see in other instances. These are unfamiliar vehicles. In many cases, people are looking to peer-to-peer to rent fast, fun, exciting cars, even just for a weekend while they're staying in their neighborhood or at home. But they're not familiar with those cars. They're not familiar with the speed. They're not familiar with how they handle, and they end up driving them fast and lose control. There's also issues of maintenance concerns. If you're just renting someone's car, you don't know how that car has been maintained and what liability or responsibility there would be for any problems with maintenance that result in injury to innocent civilians. There certainly is the Graves Amendment issue that's been addressed a little bit, and I believe will also be addressed. It's part of my testimony that's been submitted. So I just conclude that we think there are some good parts to this bill, but we would recommend amendments regarding the insurance amount. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next.
Thank you, Chairman McDuffie. Appreciate the opportunity to test today on the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Act legislation. I didn't have any prepared written statements. I can submit some later, but I just wanted to address a couple things that have come up already so far. So the focus on the testimony in support of this bill seems to be on the idea that this is personal automobiles being rented out while you're at work or something like that. But that seems to be a minority of the vehicles that are on the platform. The risk profile here is not the same as in personal auto. A lot of commercial operators have built fleets of 20, 30, 40 vehicles they're renting out on the platform. I found a 2021 survey that suggests that a majority of the vehicles are being run by these commercial operators through Turo, like the gentleman for Enterprise suggested. A majority of the vehicles being rented here are being done as a commercial operation, which is not a problem per se, but it does raise questions that require additional insurance and additional thought about the liability frameworks. You know, maintaining a vehicle solely for somebody else's safety, when every dollar spent towards maintenance is a dollar out of your own personal profits, leads people to cut corners. And that's why we would need more insurance in order to make sure the victims are not left paying for the harms here. We've seen Turo resist efforts in other states to require that recalls issued by the motor vehicle manufacturer are addressed before that vehicle is rented out. So these small business owners who have commercial vehicles, some of which are subject to a recall. They don't want to go take the time of that vehicle out of the fleet to go get the recall done. And Turo allows them to operate within that model. Turo does not do their own checks on making sure that that vehicle is up to date before they allow those on the platforms. Again, this all goes back to the fact that these vehicles create new liability issues that you may not have when you're concerned about your own personal safety, which is why you go get that recall fixed. In addition, we talked about Airbnb for cars. It seems apt. These are being run as a business, and they're renting it out to drivers who are using them for recreational purposes, including the reasons that Mr. Nace just testified to. And when you think about it that way, it's again, goes back to our fundamental issue here, that the insurance needed shouldn't be looked at as a personal auto issue. These are commercial vehicles being rented for recreational purposes, and the additional insurance requirements justified. Doesn't have to be this way. New York has provided an alternative framework, both an alternative framework for thinking about the entire system, as well as a higher auto insurance minimum requirement that we point to. And then the last thing I'd say is we agree with the gentleman from Enterprise about the Graves Amendment. Immunity should not and cannot be applied to peer-to-peer companies. We disagree with them on the policy in general. We don't think it should apply to rental car companies as well, but specifically as it applies to peer-to-peer companies, it's not legally or morally justified. So thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. If you could, though, I'd love for you to submit something in writing with your testimony. And I believe you said you already did submit yours. Right?
Yes, sir. We have
Perfect.
submitted ours. Yes, sir.
I don't have any questions for either of you, but appreciate your testimony. We're going to move next to our government witness for Bill 25-476. I think Philip Barlow, Associate Commissioner, Insurance, Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking. You're already under oath. I'll just remind you of that. And you can be seated, get situated, and begin with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie, committee members, staff, and district residents. I am Philip Barlow, Associate Commissioner for the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on Bill 25-476, the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Amendment Act of 2023. Bill 25-476 establishes standards, including insurance standards, for a peer-to-peer car sharing program. However, the bill does not fully create a regulatory regime for the program, as there is no licensing or registration process included in the bill, nor are there enforcement provisions. One way to deal with these concerns would be to include peer-to-peer car sharing programs in the district's existing regulatory scheme for transportation network companies. This would also address the insurance issues I will discuss. Bill 25-476 would, among other things, require a peer-to-peer car sharing program to ensure that during each car sharing period, the shared vehicle owner and the shared vehicle driver are insured under a motor vehicle liability insurance policy that provides insurance coverage no less than the minimum amount set forth in DC Official Code 31-2406. In addition, the bill addresses situations in which privately owned vehicles are being used for commercial purposes. Although the vehicles offered through a peer-to-peer car sharing program would have private passenger coverage for their vehicle that protects the shared vehicle owner for personal use, that coverage would not extend to the commercial use of the vehicle during its car sharing period. Those minimum requirements are liability protections for others. The minimums provide no protection for the vehicle or driver. While that may work for the owner of a vehicle who understands and accepts the limitations of the minimum standards, in this circumstance, the council may wish to impose higher insurance requirements. Many drivers elect to purchase amounts higher than the minimum and may not recognize that their coverage is diminished during the car sharing period. Also, there would be no collision or comprehensive coverage that would offer protections to the shared vehicle owner should the vehicle be damaged or stolen during the car sharing period. The insurance requirements for transportation network companies provide significantly higher limits than the minimum limits during the trip and include contingent, comprehensive, and collision coverage. If the coverage remains at the minimum, there should be a requirement that the peer-to-peer car sharing program disclose the insurance coverage provided during the car sharing period and encourage the shared vehicle owner to compare that to their personal coverage before entering into an agreement to share their vehicle. This would enable the shared vehicle owner to make an informed decision about the potential risk of making their car available as part of the program. The department supports the bill and its goals of providing regulation for peer-to-peer car sharing. We encourage the council to consider adopting a more comprehensive regulatory framework using transportation network companies as a reference. As always, we stand ready to work with the committee and industry to create a more comprehensive framework to ensure the safety of district drivers and passengers. We urge the council to take favorable action on this bill after fully considering the issues DISB raised and suggested modifications shared today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Just a few questions. The district's regulatory framework for motor vehicles is starting to fracture. I'm concerned about that. I'm worried about inconsistent requirements, confusion among consumers and residents, potential overregulation of businesses, gaps in coverage and regulation. We're seeing it here today. We saw a bit of that earlier this week in a month when the council took up regulations for carry for hire that I talked about earlier on a different bill. And that's separate from how we regulate transportation network companies. Is this balkanized approach sustainable, is the question for you? Has the executive discussed how we might consider addressing some of these issues more holistically?
I'm not aware of any discussions of a more holistic way to deal with this. I do think that is something that we can consider. It, these things keep popping up, and they're applying to not just motor vehicles, but even other types of vehicles. So I think it's something that we can look at to see if there's something that we can do. Although again, our role is insurance regulation, and I think your question may be broader than insurance requirements.
Are you all having any sort of conversations across sister agencies where the jurisdiction and mission overlap, although separate, but like they touch on?
So we serve as subject matter experts on insurance for other district government agencies in dealing with these kind of things. I mean, I think that is our major role in those kind of things, is providing expertise
Gotcha.
on the insurance part.
Okay. One critique from traditional car rental companies is that peer-to-peer car sharing companies do not want to be defined as car rental company, but nevertheless want key protections afforded to them. I think we heard a bit of that in an earlier panel. From an insurance regulator's perspective, how should peer-to-peer car sharing be regulated?
Well, again, as mentioned in the testimony, there should be insurance requirements to make sure that there are no gaps in coverage. That, I think, is the most important thing, particularly when vehicles are going back and forth between commercial and private use. And so, a system that ensures that, which I think the most direct way to do that is to have some requirements by the entity that is facilitating that transaction, to make sure that there is insurance protection in all periods. And I think that's what's done in the TNCs, and which is, I think, the thing that I'm most familiar with of vehicles passing through different stages of use and having different potential insurance implications.
I appreciate you mentioned some of that in your testimony, but do you see any other gaps that you think need to be eliminated, or any other modifications to the existing legislation that you might recommend?
I can't speak to the non-insurance aspects of it, but the bill as it is seems pretty clear that it should eliminate eliminate potential gaps in coverage. We just maybe want to pay more attention to the level of coverage and maybe make sure that given the nature of the business and some of the issues that were raised, maybe minimum limits is not the best standard for determining the amount of coverage.
We heard on the earlier panel from some of the experts in the industry, both on the peer-to-peer and on the car rental side, about what's happening in other places. I think Oklahoma is one of the places that was mentioned. Have you all looked at any other jurisdictions? Are you seeing any model legislation that might help guide the committee if the committee decides to move forward with the legislation of this type?
We have done some review of this. We've looked at what Maryland is doing, which is frankly a little complicated. I think what's happening, the way they're dealing with it in Maryland. We're familiar with what New York is doing, which seems like a potential way to address it that I think is similar to what was mentioned in the testimony. But we haven't done a comprehensive review of how other states are addressing this issue.
I believe, I can't remember which one of the witnesses mentioned it, but vicarious liability exemption was mentioned on an earlier panel. Any response to that, thoughts, concerns about that?
It doesn't seem unreasonable to the department that if it's somebody else using a vehicle that you are excused from liability of what they do. But how you structure that to to make sure that everything is being done properly, that's probably beyond what I have expertise to address.
I don't think your testimony touched on issues around taxation, so I'm just curious whether or not the department has a position on whether this bill needs to address taxation.
That's not, it's beyond our expertise, so we would not have an opinion on that.
Okay. So if it did address taxation, I was gonna make a bad joke, so I'm gonna go ahead and save it, actually. I noticed how you punted on that, but I'll spare you. I appreciate your testimony. Is there anything else you want to add to the record before we go on to the next measure?
No, thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's position.
Okay, thank you. The next measure on the agenda is Bill 25-747, the Living Donor Protection Amendment Act of 2024. I introduced this measure along with 5 of my colleagues on March 12th, 2024. The bill was referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on March 19th of this year as introduced. The bill would ensure that living organ donors are protected from insurance discrimination due to their status as a living organ donor. Let's call up our panel public witnesses on this measure. I believe they're all here in person. We don't have anybody testifying virtually. I'll call Deborah O'Garo Kelly one final time. Don't see that person present. Lauren Drew. Karen Alagno. Thomas Glassick. John Baton. Thank you all for your patience this afternoon. I know some of you all have been here for a while, so thank you for that. I will start with witnesses' testimony beginning on my left and your right. Good afternoon to you. You have 3 minutes to testify.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and thank you, council members, for this opportunity to testify in support of the Living Donor Protection Act. My name is Lauren Drew. I'm a Ward 7 DC resident and a non-directed kidney donor. I come before you today wearing 2 hats. I also work professionally for the National Kidney Foundation, advocating for patients and donors. And through that experience, I like to say, I learned too much. And so I became a living organ donor myself. In May of 2023, I donated my spare kidney to a stranger. I do not know where it went or who got it, but I do wish them the best. This decision grew directly from my work at NKF, where I met too many people desperate for a transplant and many generous individuals who wanted to donate but had faced significant barriers to doing so. I saw firsthand how living organ donation saves lives, and I saw the obstacles that prevent more people from giving this gift. I say often that becoming a living organ donor for me was almost a no-brainer because I have all the privileges and ability to do this. And it is one of the few things in this world that you can do where you know that you have substantively saved someone's life. So why not do it? But while I was fortunate enough not to face any kind of discrimination or problems after my donation, 1 in 4 living donors does report having their life insurance, disability insurance, or long-term care insurance canceled, being denied new coverage, or facing premium increases simply because they chose to save someone's life. Does not make any sense because to be a living organ donor, you go through many, many rounds of health screenings, much more than you would ever do to qualify for these kinds of insurance in the first place. And living donors have no shorter life expectancy than average and are in fact typically healthier, and studies suggest live longer than the general population. This discrimination isn't just unfair, but it actively discourages living organ donation at a time when we desperately need more donors. There are over 90,000 Americans waiting for a kidney transplant. Many of them are waiting on dialysis. The average survival rate on dialysis is 5 years. The average wait time for a deceased donor kidney is longer than that. So these patients don't really have time. In the district here, there are about 100 people waiting specifically for a kidney transplant. And that living donation transplant offers the best outcomes for patients. They have, the kidney starts working quicker in the recipient's body. The recipient has a tendency to live longer with fewer complications. Their outcomes, you know, we know people who have lived 25, 30 years with a living donor transplant, which is pretty amazing. To talk about the financial aspects of it, living donation also saves money because dialysis is incredibly expensive. Patients who are on dialysis also have many other comorbid conditions. And once you get your transplant, while the initial transplant can certainly cost some money, most patients are on a certain regimen of drugs, but go on to return to work, return to school, and have a much more productive life going forward. So obviously better for the patient, better for the patient's family, also better for Medicare and Medicaid costs. So the bill before you would ensure that living organ donors can access these types of insurance without any penalty or discrimination. I'll yield back my time.
If you got 30 more seconds, if you want to summarize.
Sure, I'll be quick. There are other 35 states that have already passed similar protections, and DC should be joining them in standing up for living donation. We ask people to give the gift of life and save the life of a friend, family member, or stranger. The least we can do is ensure that they don't face penalties for their generosity. Thank you for this important legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And thank you for your testimony. Next.
Good afternoon. In July of 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, before there was universal masking or available vaccines, my 7-year-old son was intentionally, severely, and forever immunocompromised. This was because he got a life-saving kidney transplant, and he got it from me. My name's Karen Alagno, and like any parent, I donate every organ I have to save my child. I'm proud to be a living kidney donor, but donation doesn't seem like the right word. I donated my kidney to my child the same way I donate food, water, shelter, and love to him every day. It's just what a parent does. Yet, because of my donation, insurance companies can deny or limit my access to things like life, disability, or long-term care coverage, and this is wrong. And it has twice the degree of negative impact because this kind of discrimination against living donors can prevent other people from becoming donors themselves. 1 in 3 people, 33% of the population, is at risk for kidney disease, and kidneys are the most frequently transplanted organs. My son was 7 when he received his transplant. He has a rare genetic condition, but most people who need kidneys are between the ages of 45 and 65. Their parents are typically not able to donate due to their advanced age. If every person in need of an organ transplant had a parent willing to step in, we wouldn't perpetually have 100,000 plus people on the organ transplant waiting list. We need more people to step up to become living donors, not fewer. Passing this bill is one way to help do that, and I, along with the 39% of district residents who are registered as organ donors, am asking you to support it. My donation has had no impact to my health. I ran 4 miles this morning and I'm in excellent shape by all measures for a 44-year-old woman. I'm not a high-risk insuree. Rather, as a donor, I'm more inclined to take care of my health. Denying me coverage because I chose to save a life should not be allowable by law. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. Really appreciate you sharing your personal story with us. Next.
Mr. Chairman, I'll spare you my introduction again. This is one of the great things we get to do. I'm here on behalf of DCIF and our National Insurance Trade member, the National Council of Life Insurers. I know the National Council of Life Insurers will be submitting written testimony as well. They are fully supportive of the work that you've been doing, that your office has been doing. And from the perspective of someone who does this a lot, makes my life easy because your office worked very well with the ACLI, talked through things. ACLI was able to understand and explain things. And all I get to do is come here and thank you for the work. And I also need to thank you for making your last hearing of the year mostly insurance.
I appreciate that. Appreciate your testimony as well and working with my office. Next, good afternoon to you. If you could, there you go.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is John R. Brandon Baton, and I'm a Ward 1 resident, 24-year resident of the district, and a 2-time kidney transplant recipient. I'm here today in support of B250747, the Living Donor Protection Amendment Act of 2024. This important bill will prohibit insurance companies and discrimination against people solely based on their status as a living organ donor. Here in the district, we have more than 2,800 residents living with end-stage renal disease, ESRD, also known as kidney failure. Without a kidney transplant or dialysis, ESRD is fatal. Many people are not even aware that they are at risk of ESRD. I was among those who crashed into dialysis with little knowledge of kidney disease and minimum symptoms at the time of my diagnosis. Nationally, there are over 104,000 people waiting for an organ transplant. And as of December 13th, 92,689 of these are candidates are waiting for a kidney transplant. The wait for a kidney transplant for a deceased donor can last years, and approximately 13 people die daily while waiting a transplant. The need for organ donation far outpaces availability, but this is where living organ donors come in. They save lives with the altruistic act of donation, and it is important that we protect them to make more living donations possible. Further research has demonstrated that people who donated kidney are likely to live just as long as similarly healthy people with both kidneys. The Living Donor Protection Amendment Act of 2024 establishes insurance protections for living organ donors here in the district by ensuring that insurers cannot deny, cancel, or change a person's life, disability, or long-term care insurance due to their status as a living organ donor. Similar legislation has passed in 35 states, including Virginia and Maryland. In addition to transforming the lives of kidney patients, a transplant can be cost-effective for the district and for families. While people with ESRD under 65 are eligible for Medicare to manage their disease, the high cost of dialysis can lead to patients spending down their assets and ultimately qualifying for Medicaid, especially if they are not able to work due to their health and the intensity of ongoing dialysis. Successful transplants can be so effective that recipients are moved off Medicare 3 years after surgery. The cost of a transplant is lower than long-term kidney dialysis, and it gives the transplant recipient a greater ability to remain in or return to the workforce. The Living Donor Protection Act Amendment of 2024 creates insurance protections for living organ donors, which has the potential to increase the number of organ transplants here in the district. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I hope you will support this legislation, and I'm available for any questions.
And I appreciate the testimony from each one of you, and I thought the testimony was really important, given what this bill would do if passed by the council. We are too late in the council period to actually pass it, but I wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to have this hearing so that we don't have to do this in the next council period once it's reintroduced, which I plan to do. I did want to ask, because the testimony is really great, and I really appreciate how you laid out those statistics. It's really telling if people would listen. But I wanted to begin asking with Karen Lagno and Lauren Drew, did either of you have trouble in securing insurance after your procedure? And if so, which types of insurance?
I have not yet encountered that disability or that challenge, but certainly don't want to. And I would also add, as Lauren said, transplants from living donors, best case scenario, last between 25 and 30 years. My son was 7 when he got his transplant, so we hope that he needs at least 2 more, right? So we want to make sure that any barrier that would prevent anyone from ever donating a kidney can be removed.
Absolutely.
Or any organ, yep.
Yeah.
And as an employee of the National Kidney Foundation, I am very lucky that I have all of the protections and supports one would need to become a living organ donor. But there are patients that we work with who inspired this legislation on the federal level, who lost life insurance. And that prevents people, especially when you're talking about, again, I'm a very privileged person living in the district, making good money, all the privileges. Most people who need a kidney transplant, they might not have those same protections. And they're coming from neighborhoods and communities where they also might not have. So everyone who's in their network is not having these same protections. So how do they find a donor? How can their parents be a donor if their parents are going to risk not having life insurance for the rest of the family? So it also becomes kind of a socioeconomic issue when you look at who needs the kidneys, but who is in the worst situation to be able to get one.
Right. Which I think, prohibiting insurance discrimination, as the bill would do, would provide some level of protection. And perhaps, I would think, and I don't know if you all have thoughts about this, but incentivize people to become living donors, which I think is also important. You mentioned federal law. I want to turn to Mr. Classic. States have enacted a patchwork of living donor protections in the absence of comprehensive federal law. Is the Federation aware of any unforeseen outcomes in other states that the committee should be keeping in mind as we think about this measure?
No, I am not. I do know that the ACLI has had some conversations with making sure that this legislation matches up with language in federal legislation, just for some definitional pieces. But I will make sure that the ACLI gets you if they've had different experiences in different states.
Okay, I appreciate any follow-up on that. And also, the committee is considering adding the donation of tissue to the bill. Will you follow up with us as well to let us know if the Federation would support that addition? Okay, appreciate it. I don't have any additional questions. Is there anything else that either of you all would like to add to the record? You did a wonderful job on your testimony. I really appreciate you helping us create a record for this measure. Anything else you'd like to add?
I just do a quick shout out to my transplant team at Georgetown. They were fabulous. And for anyone out there who is considering living organ donation or knows someone who needs one, they do an amazing job of counseling you through the process. And they literally let you back out right until they put you under. They will ask you multiple times, are you sure about this? Are you being coerced in any way? And so please look into it if you need to reach out. There's people up here who would be happy to answer questions, but we're always happy to talk to people. And just having a conversation about it does not commit you to doing it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Sure. If you can touch at the bottom of it.
I can also second Georgetown's recommendation over here. That's where I received my kidney transplant. The team is amazing. Information is freely available to anyone who needs to seek it. There are also other organizations available for people to gather information from, like the American Kidney Fund, the National Kidney Foundation, Infinite Legacy. So there are a number of places where information can be shared and found.
Fantastic. Thank you each for your testimony this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
going to turn next to our government witness for Bill 25-747, the Living Donor Protection Amendment Act 2024. We're going to hear again from Philip Barlow, Associate Commissioner at the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. Just a reminder, as I'm sure you know, you're still under oath from earlier. It's the third time seeing you today. Thanks for joining us once again. You can begin testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairperson McDuffie. Bill 25-747 would ensure that living organ donors are protected from unfair insurance discrimination due to their status as a living organ donor. At least 35 states have some living donor protection laws in place. Based on the American Kidney Fund's report cards on living donor protections, the District of Columbia has a C grade, lacking protections from insurance discrimination, job protected leave from private employers, reimbursements, or tax credits, deductions for donor expenses, or inclusion under the paid family leave laws. The department supports the bill, but suggests expanding the definition of the term living organ donor to include an individual who has begun the process to donate by undergoing evaluation and lab work as required by a transplant center or registry. The process for the average living donor can take 6 months or longer and involves a variety of tests and evaluations. The expanded definition would protect individuals actively working to become a living organ donor from being discriminated against by insurers, not just those who have already completed the donation process. The department is fully supportive of the council's efforts to enhance organ donation, and we hope we have offered information and valuable suggestions in our testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And thank you for your testimony in support of the bill with the suggestion that you made. Just a couple of quick questions. Based solely on a person's status as a living organ donor, the introduced version of this bill would prohibit life, disability, and long-term care insurance companies from denying, canceling, or refusing to issue coverage, determining the practice or premium for coverage, or otherwise varying any term or condition of an insurance policy. Are there any retaliatory or discriminatory actions that are missing from the bill's prohibition clause to your knowledge?
No, we're not aware of anything that should be added in that respect.
Okay. Some states, such as Michigan, have also included the donation of tissue in their living donor protection laws. Would DISB be opposed if we add tissue donation to this bill?
No, we would not.
Those are actually the only couple of questions that I had. If we have any additional questions along the way, we will make sure that we follow up. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the record before I transition to my next measure?
No, but thank you once again for the opportunity for the department to present its position.
All right, and thank you for your position, again, for your support of this measure and the recommendation that you made. The final measure on the committee's agenda today is Bill 25-1034, the revised Game of Skill Machines Consumer Protections Amendment Act of 2024. I introduced Bill 25-1034 on November 8th, 2024, and it was referred to this committee on November 26th of this year. As introduced, the measure would amend and streamline the regulatory framework for games of skill machines by shifting certain regulatory responsibility and oversight from the Office of Lottery and Gaming to the Alcohol, Beverage, and Cannabis Administration. I don't think any of my colleagues have joined. I don't see anybody online, and so I'm going to go right to calling up our public witnesses. I appreciate the patience of folks who have been with us the entirety of today. If we could have Michael Barley, Frank Fina come up and have a seat, Matt Pascal, Michael Cena.
Mr. Chairman, I think he's walking up right now. I apologize.
Okay. What about John Solomon? All right, anybody with the same organization?
Uh, all similar, but yes, different organizations, but I don't believe John is here today.
Okay, all right, well, when Michael Cena comes in, team, we'll just make sure that he has a seat. We'll start, though, with the testimony. We will begin with Michael Barley.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, everyone, for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. My name is Michael Barley. I serve as the Chief Public Affairs Officer for Paysomatic. We're the nation's leading developer of skill games. We are here to speak in support of the revised Game of Skill Machines Consumer Protections Amendment Act. In a moment, you'll hear directly from a skill game operator about the challenges, or the changes in this proposal and how that will support them. But I want to quickly touch on how this act is much needed solution to streamline the regulatory process for skill games and also touch on key aspects of the regulation that remain. Paysomatic entered the district in 2020 after this body authorized the operation of skill games. Since getting approval 3 years ago, we currently operate just 38 terminals in 15 locations. While the current process was developed in good faith, the results have proven to be less than ideal. We have seen long delays in putting games in the district due to a cumbersome and often duplicative regulatory process. Small businesses and nonprofits often struggle to make ends meet due to a host of factors. Skill game revenues can make all the difference, allowing these establishments to hire additional staff, increase benefits to their employees, make necessary improvements to their businesses, and in many cases, simply keep the doors open. For example, in DC, while the number of terminals is low in the district, on average, a location can net over $30,000 annually from a terminal. That's significant income for a small business, as you can all imagine. This body has already passed legislation to regulate and tax skill gaming terminals. In fact, this council has approved multiple measures on games of skill, many of which have been supported unanimously. Today, we are here to discuss how to improve the process. To date, the program has fallen woefully short due to an overcomplicated and time-consuming approval process. Streamlining the approval process is one of the most critical changes this legislation makes. Currently, a location must be approved by both the lottery and ABCA. The amendment now gives clear authority to approve a location to host skill games to ABCA. We want to be clear, it doesn't reduce the current requirements that are in place to ensure consumer safety and protections, just streamlines the process. A location must still meet licensing requirements, background checks, approved camera systems, and terminal locations, and that all must be approved by ABCA. The amended legislation also retains the central accounting system, which would be overseen by the lottery. After discussions with ABCA leadership, they believe that they currently have the resources and personnel to administer this program and are already overseeing the locations approved to host skill games. The resources they have will not only help to ensure a more streamlined approval process, but will have more vigilant enforcement to ensure strict adherence to the laws, regulations set forth for the industry. If we can pass this reform, we believe that it will allow additional locations to participate in a more timely manner, netting the district $3 million in annual tax revenue. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you for your testimony. Next.
Chairman McDuffie. Chairman McDuffie, members of the committee. My name is Matt Pascal. I'm an operator and distributor of skill games. My company, Entertainment Experts, provides skill games to locations in multiple markets, including here in the District of Columbia. I've been in the amusement business for over 30 years, operating pool tables, jukeboxes, video games, things like that. In that time, I've seen firsthand how skill games have supported small local business and nonprofits. As you all know, restaurants and retail establishments have been struggling for the last few years. Many local staple establishments that have been around for decades are closing. Restaurants operate on small margins and are weathering economic challenges. They need all the help they can get, and skill games are a solution. Skill games are fun for players to play and give small business the extra supplemental income they need to pay bills, wages, and more. Many are even able to support charitable causes they care about because of the extra income. DC's VFW halls and American Legion posts also host skill games and benefit from the income they provide. These are important community spaces for our veterans, and I think we can all agree, we should do whatever we can to support them. There are many locations in DC that skill games could help. Skill game regulation was passed with the right intentions, but unfortunately, the regulatory process has been nearly impossible to navigate. The current application process is very difficult. It requires APCA approval, a substantial change. And then finally, the lottery must physically visit each location, which only happens on Thursdays. And that's when we can find a slot that's available. I was fortunate enough to work with Pace-O-Matic in Wyoming through the legislative session of 2020 and 2021, pass regulation on skill games, and create the Wyoming Gaming Commission, which now has a robust approval process and can approve locations within 72 hours. The proposed changes will help streamline the approval process, allowing more small business and nonprofits to benefit from the income skill games provide. I want to thank Chairman McDuffie for presenting this proposal today, and I urge the committee to vote yes on these much-needed changes.
And thank you for your testimony. Next.
Good morning, council members. Thank you for taking time to hear my testimony today. My name is Michael Sina. I'm the owner of MyZentech, an electronics company specializing in security cameras, audiovisual, lighting, and POS systems. And we hope to add skill games to our list of offerings in DC soon. However, this has proven to be an incredible challenge. Over a year ago, in December of 2023, I submitted my skill game application to the DC Lottery. Since then, I have been met with delay after delay. I am still waiting to this day. In the beginning, I tried to work with the application team to approve my license with no result. After months, I hired an attorney to follow up, and they have been actively pursuing the matter. I can confidently say I have spent more on legal fees trying to get an answer than the license itself. It should not be this difficult to do business in DC. Skill games would not only help my business, but they would support many bars, restaurants, and convenience stores operating on thin margins in a tough economy. Skill games bring in supplemental revenue that our businesses use to create jobs, update locations, and pay bills. Skill games also bring in tax revenue for the city. These are very important reasons why streamlining the approval process and reducing unnecessary red tape in skill games are critical. The proposed reform B25-1034, the Skill Game Consumer Protection Amendment Act, would just do that. It includes necessary changes to help support small businesses, but retains the important consumer protection elements of the original ordinance. I urge you to vote yes on this act brought before you. Thanks.
And thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Next.
Council, Chairman McDuffie, council members, I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of Pace-O-Matic, and I'm just here to assist with any questions that you may have.
Got it. Okay. Frank Fina?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I do have just a couple of questions I'll ask. I'm going to direct this to Pace-O-Matic, but your testimony covers some of the issues that you face in the permitting process, and I know others have talked about that too. What about the application process for getting approved, as you described, was cumbersome? Is there a particular point in the application process where you felt like things break down? And I'll probably toss this over to you as well, Mrs. Sina.
So Mr. Chairman, I'll start, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we operate, like I said, multiple machines in multiple locations in the District of Columbia. When skill games, as the opportunity of skill games have come out, we work with the local ownership to walk through the application process. And again, I think that this is where, like specifically, it's a daunting process for anybody that owns a liquor license, because now you have to go back in front of ABRA, right, which is a little difficult and concerning. And then walking through the change process. And then, of course, then there's the lottery. And the lottery has probably been, with the background check, takes over 4 weeks. Then we have an issue with scheduling a time for the lottery to actually come out to the location and identify cameras. So we submit a plan for where the cameras will go. We work with the lottery to schedule a time for the lottery to come out and physically look at where the cameras are. Oftentimes, they come back and say, we need to add a camera, we need to change a camera angle, whatever the case might be. We do it immediately, but it's a process that takes a long time. And again, as I said, the most difficult thing I would have to say is working with the lottery to actually schedule somebody to come out and look at the location.
I think you testified that it happens on Thursdays.
Thursdays only, and that's sometimes on Thursdays.
Any idea why that is the case?
We've just been told that's the only time they have for us.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about anybody has experience in other jurisdictions. I'm sure Pace-O-Matic does. But what are some of the permitting practices that you've seen from other places that perhaps a district should consider in terms of streamlining things? Are there specific issues that you face in the district that you don't face in other jurisdictions?
Yes, Chairman. I think the biggest thing that we don't face in other is just the multiple approval stages from different different agencies. That's something we don't have in other. It's usually either a gaming commission or that, in some states that it's stood up, or the liquor, whoever controls liquor. That's typically where our games are found in liquor control license facilities.
And my understanding is that operating the games of skill machine has various security and camera requirements, as well as other licenses. Are the district's regulations for these requirements in line with other jurisdictions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they're definitely on the more stringent side, but our issue is not really adhering to that. It's just getting the approvals. We're more than willing to ensure that the public safety and adhere with what the council has set forth.
Okay. So I think it was Mr. Barley, in your testimony, you mentioned that the games of skill machines generate over $30,000. And just to clarify, is this the total revenue, or what exactly does that number represent?
So $30,000 is gross profit to the actual location.
Okay.
Which clearly, and again, we operate machines in multiple markets, and that's substantial revenue that can quite honestly be life-changing for a lot of these business owners, and it's been an amazing opportunity.
What are your interactions been in engaging with, you engaged with both APCA and you have engaged with OLG, correct?
Correct.
What has the interaction been with APCA?
APCA's been very easy to deal with.
I'm sorry, I didn't pick that up.
It's been very easy to deal with.
Okay.
Yeah, APCA's been great. Been very helpful. And I think I just want to, so I'm sorry, I'm going to ramble a little bit here, but I think they appreciate day-to-day the business that a lot of the folks do that have liquor licenses and what it takes, and they've been very helpful.
Okay. And Michael Cena, is there something that you'd like to speak to in terms of the application process, and whether you've been able to sort of pinpoint at what point in the process things have?
Yeah, I have a similar experience to Matt, where I've had no issues with APCA, but the most issues we had, and we've hit stone walls, is at OLG. It's either, I'm not sure what the issue is there, if it's staffing or just roadblocks, but as I said, I, to this day, still have not been able to achieve my license. I'm actually one step behind Matt.
I'm curious about if any of you can speak to what the revenue be from games of skill machine for those who do not have a machine in their store yet, but may.
I'm sorry, Chairman, can you say that one more time? I apologize. Just
Let me just pivot. You, Mr. Pascal, I think it was, mentioned in your testimony that games of skill have been placed in VFW halls and other similar clubs. How have these machines helped these organizations, to your knowledge? Do they generate revenues for the clubs, or are they just for use of club members.
I'm sorry, I heard the first part. The second part, does it help just the clubs or does it?
Yeah, it was generating revenue for members outside of the clubs.
Is it, I apologize, I'm maybe misunderstanding the question. So just maybe I'll answer it with what I think you're asking. And at the end of the day, the VFWs and the American Legions, they're already significantly underfunded and their membership has been declining. This has been an incredible opportunity for these folks to generate extra revenue and create a draw into their businesses that they traditionally have not had. And we've seen like probably that $30,000 to $60,000 range in an American Legion or a VFW is even more dramatic of a threshold shift than it is even for a local business. I hope that answered the question, sir.
I appreciate that. I actually don't have any other questions for this panel. Is there anything else either of you would like to add to the record before we go to our government witness?
No, thank you, Chairman. We appreciate you bringing this forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Next, if we could have the representatives from the Office of Lottery and Gaming who plan to testify come forward. Anybody from the agency who plans to testify, I'm going to swear you all in at the same time. So if you think you're going to provide testimony, I'll just go ahead and swear you in. If you could raise your right hands. If y'all don't mind, keep standing and raise your right hands, please. Do you each swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you each. Appreciate it. Good afternoon to each of you. Thanks for joining us here this afternoon. Begin your testimony whenever you're situated.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I'm Eugene Vlasenko, Interim Executive Director of the Office of Lottery and Gaming. I am pleased to present testimony on Bill 25-1034, the revised Game of Skill Machines Consumer Protection Act of 2024. Joining me today are my colleagues, Ridgely Bennett, Chief Counsel for OLG, Peter Alvarado, Interim Chief Operating Officer, and Louis Random, Interim Director of Regulations and Oversight. I would like to begin my testimony by providing current statistical information on games of skill. Today, there are 21 licensed game of skill retailers, 2 licensed distributors, and 1 manufacturer in the district. Additionally, OLG approved 2 types of game of skill machines. OLG received 33 games of skill retail applications that could not be approved because the applicants did not possess a license to serve, sell, and allow for the consumption of alcoholic beverages as required by law. During fiscal year 2024, games of skills generated over $5.9 million US in sales. That was an increase of 251% over the fiscal year 2023. The increase in sales is attributable in part to OLG approval of new game of skill machine, Cutting Edge, which was approved on May 4, 2023. During fiscal year 24, games of skill tax revenue was a little bit higher than $120,000, which was a 224% increase to compare with the previous fiscal year. Under the provisions of the bill, OLG would remain responsible for the overall regulation of games of skill machines, including the authority to determine whether any particular games meet the legal definition of a game of skill, not a gambling device, or if a game is categorized as a game of chance, a gambling device. However, the bill makes several significant changes to how the games of skill are regulated in the district. The bill transfers licensing authority for games of skill retailer license from OLG to the Alcoholic Beverages and Cannabis Administration. If APCA is given authority to issue retailer licenses, APCA, not OLG, will be agency that determines if a retailer is eligible for the license. OLG would have no control over the retailer licensing process. This includes due diligence reviews of retail applications and ensuring retailers remain compliant with district games of skill law. Since OLG would have no control over licensing of games of skill retailers, OLG would inform APCA if OLG observes retailer violations of the law, but it would be in APCA's sole discretion what, if any, enforcement action it would take against the retailer's license. Additionally, the bill removes language requiring an Alcoholic Beverages Commission licensed manufacturer to hold an on-site sales and consumption permit in order to be eligible to obtain a games of skill retailer license. The bill also removes the 2021 deadline for OLG to procure a centralized accounting system for games of skill machines. OLG recommends that the bill be amended to remove the requirement for OLG to procure a centralized accounting system for games of skill machines and substitute it with language that requires OLG to implement a system of tracking games of skill financials. This change will give OLG the flexibility to develop an in-house method of tracking games of skill transactions rather than having to procure a commercial centralized accounting system. In this case, the cost of impact on the OLG's budget of buying such a system far outweighs the benefits the centralized accounting system would bring to the district. Based on the procurement solicitation for a centralized accounting system previously issued by OLG, the estimated cost of a centralized accounting system, including design, development, testing, and implementation, would be approximately $1.5 million and would require annual maintenance cost of approximately $100,000. Finally, the bill requires OLG to amend its rules to implement the provisions of the bill. OLG has identified several technical changes to the bill, including updates to the statutory definitions of license establishment and licensee that are needed to conform those definitions to changes made by the bill. My staff will be happy to work with the committee staff in addressing these suggested changes. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony to the committee. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you for your testimony, Director. I appreciate it. I do have some questions for you and the team. I think you all were here, at least for some of the testimony. Perhaps we're listening to the rest in your offices, but you've heard, I'm sure, feedback from operators and other stakeholders about some of the challenges that they've experienced introducing games of skill machines to the district. Just give me a sense of how you all will respond to those concerns that you heard from witnesses about the red tape and other challenges that they face with OLG in trying to get these machines into the district.
The challenges which we had, they are all different by their nature, but overall, the agency has a strict regulation in terms of licensing process, and we just follow that. For instance, let me give you an example. As I mentioned, there are 33 retailers that wanted to become licensed retailers for games of skill, but we could not process their licenses because there was, and still it does exist, the restriction on consumption of the alcoholic beverages on site.
Let me stop you for a second, just make sure I understand. There are 33 applicants for a game of skill, but the restriction prohibiting alcohol sales on site is prevented because what?
Because of law. According to the law, we cannot give the license to the retailers if they have no consumption of alcohol beverages.
If they have no consumption?
Yeah, they should have the permit to have this, to have consumption, serve and service and consumption.
Got it.
Yeah, therefore, today we have just 21 licensed retailer, and all of them have this permit. But overall, if there are some challenges and they are connected with regulation, maybe my colleagues can add to the system that does exist, and we follow that. Because it might be not that easy as to get the license for some other activities, but at least this is the process which is approved according to the law, and our staff role is to follow the process, but not to break it.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that. You can feel free to add to it. Just make sure you state your name for the record.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie. My name is Luis Rendon, Interim Director for the Regulation Oversight Division for the OLG. Some of the witnesses expressed their concerns for only Thursday inspections, and that was one of the primary hindrances that they expressed. And to our understanding and our operations and the Regulation Oversight Division, we conduct inspections every day. We're not restricted to Thursdays. We go out and conduct inspections Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever duty calls. And so whenever we coordinate timeframes and schedules with retailers, we go out there and ensure they're complying with the regulations, camera placements, and anything that's required by law. So some of those concerns could be, taken care of right away with our team, and obviously the applicants.
Okay. And just to be clear, the 33 applicants that you referenced, is that in a single fiscal year or calendar year, or is that over the course of the program's history?
That was during 23-24 fiscal year.
2023?
Yeah,
And
2024.
2024?
What is the situation? The situation is that today, there are lots of opportunities how to increase the retail network of games of skill retailers. Because there are over 2,264 restaurant locations, according to the statistics of the National Restaurants Association. That's just in DC. And we have only 21 applications which were delivered to us, and out of that number of locations. And we have just one pending. Basically, it's not pending, it's in the process of approval.
What is the total number of applications that you'll have approved?
The total number is 21 within that period of time. Now we have 21 retailers and only one additional
21
application,
over-
which is in the process.
Just to be clear, 21 over what period of time? From what date to what date?
If we take from the very beginning, from the inception of
Which is
OLG
when?
responsibility of 2021, overall, according to the statistics which I have, we had 31 licenses issued, but the license term is 1 year. And after that, they were not renewed. So basically, today we have 21.
So since 2021, since you all began having the authority to license, there've been a total of 31 approved?
A total of 31. But if I would ask.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair McDuffie.
Clarify with the
So there's
last year.
21 licensed retailers right now since the inception of the transfers of authority to the OLG. Currently, there's 18 locations that are operational with actual game of skill machines inside of them. So the numbers that were presented, I believe by Pace-O-Matic, were a little off. We got the direct numbers from the representatives this week. So right now, there's 21 licensed retailers, and there's 18 locations which have operational machines.
And that's in 4 years?
Yeah. And then, but most of those restrictions are because of the APCA requirement. So we have 33, which our director just mentioned. So those 33 we can't process because of the APCA requirement. So because they don't have that endorsement.
And this is the requirement of the law.
Yeah, because they don't have an endorsement, we can't. But for that, we would be able to. So I hope that's an understanding.
Let me ask this question.
Can I clarify one thing?
Sure,
I
please.
apologize.
Just
My
state
name
your
is
name.
Ridgely Bennett. I'm Chief Legal Counsel. The requirement's not an APCA requirement that you have an on-premise consumption. It's in the law. So in order to qualify for a game of skill license, you have to have an on-premise consumption license that was issued by APCA. I just wanted to clear that.
Got it. Appreciate that clarification. Let me also clarify something. In 2020, I believe it was when, and you can correct me if I have that year incorrect, but OLG put out an impact study that stated expected revenue from games of skill was over $3 million. Is that accurate?
No,
It's not accurate?
no, what do you mean? Premier, the statistics that we have that overall, from the inception, the sales were over 9 million. I think 9 million and 9,662,000.
Are you talking about sales or revenue generated?
No, that was about total sales, and in terms of tax revenue, that was for 4 years,
If you don't mind, just
almost $190,000, out of which 120 was in 24.
those are the actual numbers that you're reporting. Can you just state those again for me, please?
So for 4 years, total tax revenue, it's from 21 to 24 was 189,524.
Okay, and from what
Roughly
year?
190.
Which year, which fiscal year we're talking about?
21 to 24. But in 24, out of that, it was 121. So it's like about 65% of total.
And what's
So
the
there
number
was
again? 189?
189,524.
524. Okay. And there was a particular fiscal year where it was higher. Which year is that?
24, the last one.
24.
Even with this limited number of retailers, there was a 251% increase in sales and to 24% increase in revenue.
120,703. All right, I'm talking about a different number though. There was a 2020 impact study that OLG did that stated expected revenue of games of skill would be over $3 million. Is anybody familiar with that?
I think you're
Yeah.
talking about the Spectrum Gaming study that was done.
I think that's it.
I don't have that in front of me, so I don't know the numbers, but I am aware of the study. Yes.
Okay. And so obviously the numbers you report, wow, the $120,703.40 is apparently 224% increase in tax revenue over 2023. It's far from the over $3 million that the impact study said
It is.
could be generated. So what do you attribute that to, that huge disparity in what the impact study said could be generated with what the actual revenue is?
But the study was conducted before we started that business regulation, and it is based on the number of machines installed and the number of forecasted the volume of forecasted sales that could those machines generate. I'm not familiar with the details of that study, but normally it incorporates number of games per machine and average capacity of a location. The point is that the role of OLG in that process is we are the regulator. It's not like with the lottery where we are the regulator and operator and we are responsible for the network and number of retailers we have, which games we represent on the market and so on. In this case, we believe that this area has a lot of opportunities which are not used even in the existing format of the law and of the requirements. Because today, less than 1% of restaurants in DC are covered with the game of skill machines. But this is responsibility of distributors. They need to bring applications to OLG to process, and we are lacking this.
But I guess the concern is that when they do bring applications to OLG to process, that process is inefficient and time consuming.
If it is inefficient and bureaucratic, we are ready to discuss that with our partners. We are ready to improve, but unfortunately, we have just one pending application. Only one. It's not just because we refused and it was a very long period of its processing. Maybe the process is not perfect and we can work on that. But I also encourage our partners not to wait until like hearing. If there are questions, let's not accumulate those questions. Let's address it to us, and I'm always open to talk.
Well, I appreciate that, and that I'm sure is important for potential applicants to hear. On the other hand, I'm not sure that OLG has come to the council or I mean, have you all made recommendations about how to streamline the process to make it more efficient, given the actual revenue that's been generated and the lack of machines that are in places across the District of Columbia? Where have you all been proactive in this process?
We are working on that, and in terms of the numbers which were forecasted by the study several years ago, we just look into improvement overall on both sides. And again, we believe that with some changes that we're passing now, the process is getting better. And from statistics that we have, that's from 4 to 6 weeks that we need really to process and approve an application for and make it licensed.
In your testimony,
but how can we improve the process if we don't have applications?
In your testimony, you mentioned a large increase in play this past year, largely attributed to one new game getting approved. Would you anticipate that as more games get approved, the growth would be similar? Or is this game in particular just independently popular? Like, what would you attribute that to?
I believe this is a question more like to the manufacturer and their marketing team. So what kind of other games do they have? But I believe that if there was only one machine before that and then introduced another one, we simply had 10 games out of just one in the previous one. And
How many applications were approved this year, fiscal year, FY24?
There were 21 overall in 24 and 12 in 23.
I'm sorry, what's the number in 24?
21.
21 approved in 24
in
and 12
24.
approved in 23?
Yeah, but this like renewals, it's not always new retailers.
So
because application is for
let's start
1
that
year,
over.
so this, yeah.
I'm going to start with FY21 and then just go down the line real quick. How many applications, new applications were approved in FY21?
Peter, thank you for this question, and I will ask Peter to help with the historic statistic for that year.
So I think we'll get back to you on the 21 and 22 fiscal year license approvals. We have the 23 data, which is 12 approved
12.
licenses. Yes, sir.
Do you know whether those are 12 new or 12?
Those are all new.
All new?
Yeah, and then 24, there were 21 approved. Game Let's Go.
21. Okay, new?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we'll prepare this information after our meeting and send to you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and you mentioned what the impact was of a new game, of the cutting edge game. And yeah, it was attributed mostly to that. So when that game came to play, and it was approved last year, May 2023, when that game went live, the numbers shot up.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be attributed to that, the rise in revenue.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. I think you mentioned, Director, that OLG identified a common issue that impedes applicants from getting permitted for games of skill. We talked about this earlier about the APCA liquor license, and I appreciate Ms. Bennett's clarification. Does the amendatory language of the legislation help to streamline that issue?
So if you mean streamline, it doesn't streamline, it removes a requirement for manufacturers. I think we could work with your staff to, if that's the goal, to help clarify the statute.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yes.
I believe you had some other recommendations. Any other recommendations you'd like to put on the record?
So the only one is that there's some technical changes that need to be made. So when we talk about a retail license, that's transferred to ABCA, but if you look at the definitional section of the statute, it says a license issued by the office instead of the board. So they're just technical changes that we're happy to work with.
Okay.
But the main recommendation, if I can, just it's not connected with the technical points of the language of the law, but in terms of the centralized accounting system, if you can consider just really the replacement that very expensive tool with the monitoring system, which can save a lot of money for the district. And we are ready to discuss further with your staff in terms of like what is the best option. If I would ask Peter Alvarado to add some.
Yes, Peter Alvarado, I'm the interim Chief Operating Officer. I just wanted to add one more thing about the centralized accounting system.
Sure.
And our recommendation that we can find an alternative. That alternative would also relieve the retailers from having to spend resources to connect it to a centralized system. And so it not only reduces our cost, but it would reduce the retailers' costs as well, because they, if we had to do the centralized accounting system, the retailers would have to connect their systems, and there's a cost associated with that to connect them to our to the centralized system. So it would reduce cost on both sides.
Thank you.
To be clear, I don't know that you offered any pushback in your testimony in moving the permitting to APCA. And so I wanted to just confirm if you believe it would be better suited if housed in APCA, or do you have a particular position on that?
Actually, we're in a situation when what is good for the district is good for the agency. And if you believe that APCA licensing of retailers will make the process easier and will help to, in the end of the day, that's a tool to generate additional revenue. So we're okay with that. The only thing is the devil is in details, and we need to work together then with APCA to make sure that it would not become more complicated to the retailers, but really easier to retailers, because still we are responsible for the machines. For their approval, and we need to put stickers there, and then they need to go to APCA for the license as a retailer. So there should be very good communication, which is like everything in-house with another agency that really to provide a good quality service to the retailers.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we don't have retailers today that they can speak on behalf of them. But I think that from the perspective of the lottery business, that I often just talk to the retailers, and they really ask, so whatever is less complicated is more beneficial for them.
Got it. And I'm gonna just make sure you turn your mic on the base if you want to offer something. I wanted to ask also though, have you all taken any enforcement actions against any games of skill operators?
The enforcement.
Okay.
Not today.
All right. Is there something else that you wanted to offer?
I just want to say, if APCA does take the responsibility to license retailers, just want to make sure that the responsibilities are aligned to ensure who is handling compliance and regulatory enforcement, right? Because if as it stands, the OOG is responsible for licensing manufacturers and distributors, which is a lot less burdensome than licensing retailers, because the retailers, you do have to go out and conduct inspections, request documents, financial documents, and sometimes, we're in DC, a lot of people don't want to give up their financial information and personal documents. So I understand what the witnesses were saying, but a lot of times it's on them to actually produce those documents to us, such as agreements. We email and we call, and today I made a call and they told me, specifically to a witness today, they told me that we've been working on this for months, since May this year. And so a lot of the times that statements presented is not realistic based on facts that we checked. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I don't have any additional questions at the moment. Is there anything else that you all like to add to the record? Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
Thank you, and just look forward to the follow-up on a couple of those matters that you mentioned.
Yeah, and we took your point about to be proactive. We just started, and believe we will show the results.
Thank you for that. I'd like to thank everyone who testified on all of the measures on our agenda today. As a reminder, those interested in submitting written testimony for the record may do so until Tuesday, December 24th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Submissions should be uploaded via the hearing management system on the council's website at dccouncil.gov. There being no further business before the committee, this marks the end of today's public hearing. The time is now 2:38 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.